An unquestionable class system reigned supreme in Terra. It was a rule established by the hero himself, the seventh king of the Blade. Even the greatest warrior in history, the first king of the Blade, who defeated the king of the dark spirits and saved humanity, was not exempt from this rule. The fate of those who betray the Empire is execution. And the first king of the Blade, the rebel Laiba Lanton, suffered this fate. 2 men beat the boy, proclaiming themselves his masters in front of the boy, who was, of course, a slave. The chained youth declared that they were nothing more than the city lord's lapdogs. A few years ago, these men weren't even worthy of cleaning the shoes of the boy, for he was the grandson of Laiba Lanton. The man continued the beating, saying that he was the grandson of a rebel, and that it was a miracle that the emperor had allowed him to live so long. The main character grabbed the whip, and added that it was thanks to people like them that he was occasionally reminded of his noble status. But the bullies did not consider Laisel noble. They were bearers of the sacred seal, chosen masters. Besides being the grandson of a traitor, the men noticed that Laisel couldn't use even the slightest bit of the sacred seal's power. The beating continued, and the young man could no longer respond as the bearers laughed at his helplessness. But as they continued to beat him, a little girl stepped in and stopped the men. The slave girl Xiaomi told them that the deputy captain had ordered them to report that it was time for training. The man snorted and told the slave that they weren't done with him yet, but they would leave him alone for now. Xiaomi wanted to know how Laisel was feeling, but he said that such minor wounds didn't bother him. Xiao felt sorry for her, because in her opinion, it was her fault, as the girl had accidentally broken the plate. Laisel didn't care about that. Protecting girls was a man's duty. Besides, the bandits had wanted to bully Xiaomi, and he had only saved her. The girl praised Laisila, because despite his weakness, he never backed down out of fear. Xiao tried to cheer up Laisel, but one of the men ordered the slaves to get to work. At that moment, the guards were training at the combat training ground in Grey Rock. The main character began his work, cleaning swords for training. It had been 5 years since he became a slave. His family was dead. In the midst of the chaos, his mother had asked him to take his sister and run for their lives. Laiba had betrayed the Empire and forced his descendants to endure this hell. But Laisel was certain that he would never let these people get away so easily. One of the overseers struck the slave and ordered him to hurry up, cleaning all the swords faster. Laisel wanted to get out of this hell as quickly as possible, while Xiaomi tried to help him. The girl noticed the slave's defiant look, to which Laisel replied that no one was born to be weak. When he managed to unleash the power of the sacred seal, no one would dare treat him like that again. After the Lanton family fell, those who wanted to uncover the secret of the first Sword King's power were imprisoned. They took Laisel's blood, cut him open, and tested drugs on him every day, conducting many sophisticated experiments. They even implanted cells from a dark demon into his body, trying to awaken its power. The stimulus was insufficient, and in the end, when they realized that I would never be able to awaken the power of the sacred seal, but after many attempts, Laisel was eventually sold to a local slave owner. He believed that as long as his body could withstand enough stimulation, he would definitely be able to awaken the sacred seal. The men finished their training, and one of them grabbed Xiaomi by the hair and reminded her that she was supposed to bring the medicine. Laisel rushed to save the girl from the abuse, but he was easily pushed away with a kick. The slave girl begged Lord Phalo to let her go, but his dirty intentions spoke otherwise. The second man laughed, noticing that Laisel was making the other slaves do his work. The main character had no choice but to drop the sword in his hands and aim it at the Lord. The master printer waved his finger and stopped the sword in midair, demonstrating his innate strength. The bully decided to teach the young man a lesson and sent the weapon flying toward him, greatly increasing its speed. Laisel managed to dodge the sword's first thrust, but it changed course and caught up with the young man. The blade was faster than the slave, and the sword's destructive flight pierced Laisel. The master of the press praised himself for how he had changed the trajectory of the air. Behind him, he heard someone's voice. It was the deputy captain of the Shadow Iron Squad, a second-class printmaster named Calder Philip. The pathetic printmasters began to justify themselves to Calder, saying that the slave had attacked them with a weapon, and that they had simply used a little printing skill to teach him a lesson. The deputy told the Lord that he could have easily killed Laisel with one blow, but he hadn't expected him to dodge. Calder approached Laisel, and out of his unbridled anger, struck him in the stomach. Since the slave had the audacity to dodge, the printing master was about to kill Laisel. The deputy deliberately struck the main character in a vulnerable spot, but he did not cry out in pain. Laisel's father, Dean Lanlot, was the Empire's leading alchemist among the 5 great alchemist sages. His mother, Elena Lanlot, was a genius spiritual master, and his grandfather, Laiba Lanton, was the Empire's first king of the Blade. The first Sword King betrayed the Empire and was executed, and the Lanlot family was destroyed along with him. Without the ability to use the sacred seal, Laisel was just someone who had fallen out of favor, even to the point of slavery. The boy didn't care about the deputy's words at all. he just spat on his boot in silence. The deputy ordered the master to seize Xiaomi, deciding to punish her for disobeying Laisel. Once he became a slave, he was no longer a person, but merely a tool of his master. The deputy did not wait. The man stabbed the dagger straight into the girl's heart as she screamed in pain. The master smiled as Xiaomi died. The deputy wanted to show Laisela how long a heart could beat after being ripped out. The main character could no longer control himself and managed to break free from his attacker's grip. In a split second, Laisela's resistance ceased to be verbal and turned into an attack. But the deputy was ready for the attack. He turned around and kicked the enraged young man. Laisel was weightless. The boy didn't understand anything. The pain just passed. A mysterious voice confirmed that the young man was dying. At that moment, Laisel assumed that the mysterious seal had awakened. He didn't understand the meaning of the sword if the stimulus needed to awaken it was death. The mere thought of demons and humans coexisting seemed delusional. But the monster declared that Laisel had no say in the matter. Very few people were capable of sharing their entire lives with him, and he had been waiting for this opportunity for hundreds of years. Moreover, coexisting with a demon not only gave him the opportunity to live, but also to give him a small gift. The main character came to his senses. His hair turned red, his eyes burned, and an aura surrounded him. One of the printing masters decided to neutralize the slave himself. The demon said that blood memory allowed the boy to inherit all the abilities of his ancestors. The extent of his abilities depended on how powerful his ancestors were. The blood memory kicked in and allowed Laisel to neutralize the man. The printing masters assumed that Laisel had gone mad. His appearance was terrifying, and his aura made them doubt their own strength. Lord Phalo attacked the slave many times, but now his sword blows could not even come close to the boy. The guards heard the commotion and could see from a distance that Phao was fighting Laisel. The guards did not understand if this was training, but suddenly Laisel counterattacked Lord Philo. The man could barely stand after that blow, but he managed to grab the young man by the arms. The second master of the seal came to his senses, jumping high into the air. The man was about to kill Laisel. His seal power created a beam of energy that struck the motionless protagonist directly. Laisel declared that such low-level martial arts were easy to counter and absorb. The guy said he would show a technique he had learned in the East, the superior bull strike. The printmaster knew that amplifying strikes with another's power was beyond the capabilities of an ordinary human. Laisel's body was on par with that of a novice printmaster. The incredible skills of his grandfather were beyond the young man's reach at this stage. The guards waited in anticipation, expecting some incredible move from the young slave, but he did nothing. Suddenly, Laisel simply walked up to the printmaster and kicked him in the groin with a swing. The deputy was furious, for the lowly slave had drawn too much attention to himself. One of the guards turned to Calder and said that the city lord had suddenly summoned him. Guests had arrived in the neighborhood, and therefore the lord needed a deputy. Calder told Laisel that he was lucky today, but he would return soon. Before leaving, the deputy ordered the nearest guards to lift Phalo and his friend. Laisel immediately rushed to Xiaomi. The people around him praised the slave for teaching the printing masters a lesson. But to the main character, Xiaomi and her condition were much more important. So he ran away without paying attention to the chatter of the people around him. Everything seemed like a dream to Laisel. But he had finally obtained the sacred seal and the power of his ancestors. This meant only one thing. He would be able to take revenge. The guards rushed to the beautiful fence, and the man turned to the guild secretary, Emily. Laisel introduced himself to the secretary, holding the dying Xiaomi in his arms. Without a word, the secretary asked the young man to follow her inside the building. Emily led the young people to the pharmacy. Opening the door, she addressed Dr. Allen, informing him that they had new patients. The man said he was busy because they had just taken in 2 patients, and he was preparing a potion. The doctor didn't understand why Emily had brought slaves. They belonged to the city lord, and the girl was seriously injured. Allen said that they were slaves anyway, and she served the city lord, so he wasn't going to treat them. Laisel asked for some medicine and bandages, as he could treat the wound himself. The doctor waved his hand, saying that 1 bottle of potion was worth much more than the miserable lives of slaves. Suddenly, Allen ran inside, as the condition of his potion had deteriorated significantly, and he was trying to stabilize it. The main character revealed that the doctor had added too much jordanite, but there wasn't enough ice shard and herb leaf. If a little more power from the sacred seal was added, the cauldron would explode with its contents inside. In the end, the cauldron couldn't hold, and Allen was angry that another set of ingredients had gone to waste. Emily asked the doctor to be more careful so he wouldn't burn down the pharmacy again, but Allen insisted on his way. While the man was angry about the loss, Laisel noticed that his formula had been wrong from the start. Allen had added too many minerals and not enough herbs. The proportions were wrong, and the fat was too thick. It was inevitable. In the end, creating destructive star blood is forbidden, and the formula has long been destroyed by the guild. Emily was shocked as Allen tried to justify himself saying he had done it for academic purposes. Destructive star blood is extremely useful for improving printing skills, but the adverse effects it causes are unimaginable. In the worst case, a person could go mad. The doctor was sure that an ordinary slave would not know about this, but Lysel assured him that his information was reliable. Soon, Alan recognized the young man as the grandson of the first king of the Blade and the son of the legendary Dean. The young man paid no attention to the words of strangers and examined the assortment of herbs on the doctor's table. Alan told the boy not to touch his things, but Lysel stopped him, saying that he could help create star blood. If the president found out about this, they would be in trouble. The boy added that it was only for academic purposes. Alan agreed with Lysel, as he really wanted to create the destructive star blood. The main character reminded the doctor of the dying Xiaomi and the guard Mao, who was crying over her. Alan began treating Xiaomi while Lysel prepared the potion, but the doctor was still unsure of its effectiveness. After the treatment, the doctor gave Mao a potion that would restore the girl's life force. The doctor expected the destructive star blood, as he had done his part. But Lysel surprised the man even more, for he had already prepared the potion and handed it to Alan. While the young man was learning about Xiaomi's condition, the doctor was shocked. After conducting experiments for 6 months and failing countless times, the guy in front of him had finished the potion so quickly. Lysel took the potion and noticed that the destructive star blood should be slightly sour with a grape aroma. Alan was already overjoyed, as everything matched. But just as he was about to take the potion, Lysel dropped it. When the potion fell, the young man said that the forbidden research was coming to an end. Alan wanted to know why he had dropped the potion. The young man said that the recipe was described in the 6th section of the 11th chapter of the Alchemy Compendium, but the doctor had already stopped hiding his intentions. He didn't want to conduct research. He just wanted to strengthen his power. Emily threatened to tell the president if the doctor persisted. But Alan said he didn't care, because he didn't belong to the guild. Sir Alan was a member of the Royal Guild of Alchemists. However, during one of his experiments, he burned down his laboratory and destroyed many rare ingredients, so he was exiled to the Greyrock branch. As a second-class master printer, Alan demanded compensation for the destroyed potion. Lysel said that such a worthless potion had no value, which angered the doctor even more. The doctor added that a slave should pay before shouting about value in front of him. Alan almost attacked Lysel, but stopped because the boy had a way to increase his talent without restrictions. The main character recognized the doctor's skill. Such magic affects the enemy's senses, but if it doesn't work, there is a side effect. Throughout Terra, countless people seeking power studied various skills, including high-level ones, but the most sought-after skill of all remained the ability to become strong. Mao decided to take Xiaomi back to feed her. Meanwhile, the doctor wanted to know what to do. Lysel asked him to forget about it. A man as evil as Alan would only bring chaos if he possessed such a skill. The doctor revealed that he had other ways to make him talk. But for some reason, he didn't use them. In fact, his method was to fall to his knees and beg Lysel to reveal his secrets. It would affect the guild's reputation. But the doctor didn't care. He kept begging. After mocking him a little, Lysel started laughing and said he would teach Alan after all. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the main character directed his power at the pot of food, causing it to glow. This technique was invented by Dean, an alchemical ability that increased the nutritional value and taste of food. Thanks to this ability, the bread was much softer, and the taste resembled roasted beef. When everyone had gone to bed, Lysel used his spiritual art to slowly heal himself. Elena Landlot created a technique that restores the body faster than usual through sleep. As a result, after 3 hours of sleep, Lysel was not tired, and his body was perfectly restored. If he hadn't awakened the power of the sacred seal, Lysel wouldn't have realized how weak his body was. Upon stepping outside, the young man wanted to strengthen his body using the power of someone he hated. Laiba, the first king of the Blade, had to borrow his strength to strengthen Lysel's body. Using the divine striking blow, the first style of the divine rupture, all blows were directed at Lysel. This technique can push the body to its absolute limits, bringing every part of the body into a state of intense tempering. In this state, physical abilities will grow at an incredible rate even with simple training. But everything has its price. It's not only a serious strain on the body, but also significantly shortens life expectancy. These methods seem too radical, but Lysel only wanted to surpass Laiba's strength. At the same time, Alan searched every corner of the guild for all the ingredients Lysel had mentioned, all because the main character didn't want the doctor to use his services for free. Alan was already disappointed, as Lysel had written down an absurd list of ingredients that were not available in the guild. Someone appeared in the hallway. The girl noticed that she had found an excellent recipe using horn cream and a glowing psyllium stone. 4th-class master printer Fina Garcia wanted to know if it was Alan's recipe. The president also entered the room, and Garcia asked Edward to take a look at this unusual recipe. The president of the Holy Guild, 4th-class printing master George Edward, noticed the unusual nature of this recipe. Alan was shocked, as such brilliant minds were conducting research on a recipe from Laisel. Garcia looked at him and suggested that the doctor might have inherited the legacy of soul temperers. Laisel, meanwhile, carried huge stones on his back. For each trial, he needed another ounce of strength. The legacy of soul hardeners, a mysterious alchemical recipe rumored to have spread among the guilds, was said to be capable of creating creations beyond imagination. However, since the energy emanating from the dark materials obtained was considered excessively powerful and dangerous, the recipe, known to the general public as dark alchemy, was declared by the 5 sages to be subject to destruction. But to this day, no one has revealed the identity of the temperer who created such a legacy. Alan claimed he knew nothing. Before him stood the kingdom's most distinguished alchemist, who had been granted the privilege of traveling among the guilds in search of the legacy of the soul temperers, Fina Garcia. Due to the uniqueness of the recipe, Garcia wanted to delve deeper into the research together, but she did not have the time. Garcia left, asking Calder to take her to the city lord. While Alan wondered how Laisel had managed to write such a phenomenal recipe, throughout Terra, seal masters relentlessly sought to enhance the power of their sacred seals, which was represented by their ranks. There are 12 classes of sacred seals. With each higher class, a person's physical training and strength would improve by leaps and bounds. Advancing to a higher class was extremely difficult, requiring considerable effort to improve, along with the use of potions as aids. Laisel sought to carefully hone his combat skills, tempering them in battle, giving it his all. Recalling the demon's words that he could inherit all the knowledge, experience, and skills of his ancestors, Laisel became even more confident. Blood memory allowed him to inherit all the skills possessed by the members of his deceased family. Laisel could feel the power of his mother, father, and grandfather, but not that of his younger sister, Eileen. This meant that Eileen could still be alive. Born with a sacred mark, she was not someone to be trifled with. Thanks to Laiba's skill, Laisel's body transformed into that of a warrior in the blink of an eye. However, this also drained his energy considerably. Physically, he was still unable to recover with the help of potions. With Xiaomi's excellent massage skills and natural healing abilities, Laisel healed himself. By combining treatment with massage, his body would recover before he knew it. Now that his muscles were relaxed, Laisel felt much better and ready to train. However, with his first-class sacred seal physique, simply expending spiritual energy on recovery would not help expand his energy reserves. Ermao entered and said that someone from the guild had summoned him. The main character was delighted by this news, as he thought it might be Alan who had obtained the ingredients. When he arrived at the location, there was no one there, but suddenly a sword was thrown toward the young man. Turning around, Laisel noticed the same printmakers who had mocked him earlier. Calder said that Laisel might be a first-class master, but he didn't stand a chance. However, if he knelt down and begged for mercy, the deputy might change his mind. The main character said mockingly that this was because there was no one capable of replacing the injured master printers, which dealt a huge blow to the unit's combat effectiveness. Calder could no longer tolerate these taunts. Drawing his blade, he was ready to teach Laisel a lesson. The Tiger's Fury martial art sent several air slashes flying, but the guy dodged them. Laisel called it mediocre martial arts and counterattacked, stunning the deputy. The main character said that a second-class print master with average martial arts skills was quite troublesome. But Calder was too slow to take advantage of this skill. Although Laisel had grown stronger, the deputy was still confident that he was stronger, using the same attack a second time. This time, Calder landed on the ground and shook the earth with his power. But the young man dodged again. Immediately after that, 2 air slashes flew after Laisel, causing him trouble. The main character dodged again, grabbed a nearby blade, and said that this was a secondary martial art. As he lunged forward, Calder was unable to react, and Laisel struck him in the stomach. The blows could be brutal, but the deputy compensated for this with his weak defense. With his last ounce of strength, Calder shouted that he was a second-class master of the seal and swung his blade. Laisel used the spiritual art of deadly retribution, enveloping himself in a terrifying aura. Calder was stunned. The bloodlust in the young man's eyes made him flinch. Laisel decided to end the fight by striking Calder in the face. Finally, he transformed from a loser into a winner. Lord Greyrick Ludolf Herman pointed and asked Lady Garcia to sit down. The Lord learned that the girl was searching for the legacy of the Soul Temperers. In addition to her desire for deep knowledge in the field of alchemy, Garcia's main goal in uncovering the legacy of the Soul Temperers was actually to find a cure for the disease of the underworld. According to rumors, most of the alchemy of the Soul Temperers required cooperation with the spiritual arts, but few people mastered them, so Ludolf would not be able to help, but Milady wanted to do it herself. The Lord began to praise Lady Garcia for this. There was no one in Greyrock who understood the spiritual arts. The girl had only clues about the cure for the disease of the underworld. Fina Garcia was confident of her success when suddenly there was a crash behind her. The girl immediately recognized the man. It was Sir Calder, who had previously shown her the way. Coolly and confidently, Lysel placed his sword against Calder's neck and said he would end it. The deputy had no choice but to admit defeat and surrender. But Lysel had no intention of stopping. He stabbed Calder in the leg and said he would end his life. The man couldn't believe the young man's confidence, as he was the deputy captain of the Shadow Iron Squad from the battalion commanded by the city lord. The hero said that he had always been one to settle scores, and after what he had done to Xiaomi, he would not die a peaceful death. Sir Calder had already surrendered, so Garcia didn't want Lysel to kill him. For a slave, killing a master printer was a serious crime. Lysel didn't care. Garcia was angry about this, because even the city lord treated her with respect, but some slave dared to defy her. At that moment, Alan was passing by. The boy immediately noticed him and asked if he had gotten the ingredients. Alan happily announced that he had managed to gather everything, but he had to go to the neighboring town. The main character asked the doctor to wait a moment while he killed a minor criminal. Calder begged for mercy, but Lysel decided to spare his life, but not before giving the man a thorough beating. Taking the blade for himself, Lysel approached Alan and decided to go to the alchemy lab with him. Calder couldn't stand such humiliation. He wanted to kill the young man as soon as the captain returned. Garcia decided not to be angry with Lysel while he was discussing the ingredients with the doctor. The girl overheard the discussion about the recipe and even thought that the slave was the one who had written it. In the laboratory, the main character complained that the bell was not of the best quality. To prepare Lysel, he would need to borrow Alan's cauldron, but first he promised to help the doctor improve his skills. The main character agreed, and immediately wanted to know the doctor's alchemy level. Lysel was disappointed that Alan had the lowest level, and had miraculously made it into the Guild of Saints. The young man also had a beginner's level in martial arts, alchemy, and spiritual arts. Using the power of the sacred seal, humanity created 3 different disciplines: martial arts, alchemy, and the rarest of them all, spiritual arts, collectively known as the sacred arts. Thanks to rigorous physical training, martial arts allow you to deliver devastating blows in battle. With mastery of the sacred seal, alchemy allows one to extract, decompose, and fuse materials to create medicines and equipment. Spiritual arts allow one to create magical spells and illusions by manipulating the energy of the soul. However, due to the lack of people skilled in spiritual arts, there were few developed techniques for this. Sacred arts are usually divided into 5 main levels: beginner, basic, intermediate, advanced, and elite. People were born with innate talent for various types of arts. It is easier to raise the level of a sacred art in which a person is more talented, allowing them to master higher-level techniques. The 12 classes of sacred seals determine a person's physical form and strength, while their talent rating determines their mastery of techniques. At first, Lysel wanted to ignite Alan's soul core with his spiritual energy. The doctor had never heard of such a technique before. This would sharpen the doctor's senses and improve his alchemy skills. But the effect is temporary, and there may be a backlash, so it is usually used as a last resort. Alan had heard that spiritual arts involved manipulating and refining the energy of the soul. Even at the lowest level, simply possessing this talent meant that a person's power grew not by the day, but by the hour. In a couple of seconds, the doctor's body glowed. He needed to practice alchemy as much as possible. Now Alan had to help Lysel create a medicine that would help in the practice of alchemy. The main character wanted to create a dragon's breath potion. The doctor only had to follow his instructions. Alan poured too much energy into it, and as a result, the ceiling of the furnace with the boiler burned out. But after a while, they managed to create 3 portions of medium-level potion. Lysel said it was a waste of precious materials, as all 3 potions were different colors. The main character had to improve them using spiritual arts. Finally, after infusing them with spiritual energy, these potions turned into a powerful soul elixir. Alan was once again convinced that those born into an elite family are truly different. The doctor suggested that this mysterious technique was similar to the legacy of soul temperers. Lysel confirmed that this was indeed the case. Many years ago, someone traveled among the guilds of saints, conducting alchemical research on the fusion of souls. The research was ultimately banned by the Empire due to its potential risk. This person concealed their identity with the help of Lysel's father, and that person was Elena Landlot. Since then, she has devoted herself to research in the spiritual arts, and has become famous throughout the Empire as a genius in the spiritual arts. The main character decided not to reveal where he had learned such techniques, as it was supposedly nothing special. Lysel could have repaid him with the dragon's breath potion, but he was not supposed to tell others that he possessed the legacy of the soul temperers. Energy reserves are limited, especially at low seal ranks. In addition to natural regeneration, they can absorb the surrounding natural energy to restore energy, albeit in minimal amounts. The dragon's breath potion could significantly improve absorption, thereby accelerating regeneration. Alan took the potion. Thanks to this, with his newly awakened soul core, his abilities should reach the basic level in no time. Laisel said that even if Alan returned to the capital, as a basic level alchemist, he would not be able to do anything. After asking the doctor to stay for 2 more months, the protagonist convinced him that he could raise him to the level of a third-class master printer, but in return he must act as his mentor and allow him to rid himself of his slave title at the decisive trial. If a criminal is guided by a second-class master printer or higher and proves their strength in court, they can receive absolution from the authorities and be freed from their status as criminals or slaves. Even though they remain under the supervision of the authorities, he now possessed power. But if he tried to escape, the magical slave mark would make him a fugitive. It would then be difficult to move between cities, and other slaves would be punished. He needed to gain strength quickly, but he couldn't achieve that with basic training alone. Ermau had heard that Laisel had crippled Calder, but the young man only said that he would kill the deputy if he dared to cause trouble again. But even if Calder and his ilk were no match for Laisel, they still had someone better. Tiffin Apaldi, captain of the Shadow Iron Squad. Apaldi was also the commander of the city's Grey Rock Squad. This pleased the main character, for the captain could be a stepping stone to greater power and success. Roca Edward, a sorcerer of the Gog Guild, and Fina Garcia carefully tried to create an alchemical item. Garcia created the item, which was a heavenly fern. The girl had amazing skills. She could grow full-fledged herbs from seeds alone. The heavenly fern would absorb the disease of the underworld and turn it into icy lymph, which could be eliminated with burning herbs, so it was a potential cure. But he was still looking for the right herbs, and the heavenly fern required further processing for better absorption of the disease of the underworld. So there was still a lot of research to be done. The girl said she had seen Edvard's guild slave, Lysela. The president said there was no such person in the guild. The man quickly remembered that this was the only survivor of the Lanlot family. He revealed that this young man was a member of a once great family. He was the grandson of the first king of the Blade, the son of one of the 5 saints who founded this guild. After becoming a slave, he eventually ended up in Greyrock. Garcia realized that this boy was the son of Madame Elena. She was her most revered idol. She even believed that he might be a legendary blacksmith. Edward laughed, as this side of Garcia was quite unexpected. Now the girl understood everything. Such an unusual recipe was to be expected from Elena Lanlot's son. Alan tried to convince the Lord to give Lacey a chance, as he was a gifted man. At that moment, Garcia entered the office, saying that she wanted to make some inquiries. The doctor wanted Lacey to be allowed to participate in the decisive trial. But what Lanlot had done was treason, the most serious crime in the Empire. The Lord was not entirely opposed, but decided to ask someone else. Gog immediately joined the conversation and objected, leaving aside the question of whether they could pardon traitors. Alan, as a mentor, was not prepared to take such responsibility upon himself. The doctor knew the consequences. Lysel said that working as a traitor to the Empire would definitely ruin his resume. The investigation would not end there. They would be sentenced to a more severe punishment if he committed another crime. None of this bothered anyone but the weak. Once they gained power, Alan would understand how broad the path of destiny really was. Any second-class master printer could become his mentor. But Lensel was the only one who could help him become stronger. The Lord said that the guild would be held responsible if Sir Alan acted as mentor. Garcia said that delivering a verdict at the decisive trial was no easy feat. If he truly possessed such valor, he would never be satisfied with a life of slavery. The Lord liked Garcia's answer and asked Hogg for his opinion. The man replied that in that case, the responsibility would fall on the Guild of Saints. Hogg wanted to be the judge in this confrontation and conduct the trial with maximum intensity. If Lysel Lanlot failed the trial, Alan would have to suffer punishment as the mentor. The Lord noted that the guild took this matter seriously, but Alan agreed to the conditions. Ludolf would allow his slave, Lysel Lanlot, to participate in the next trial to earn the chance at amnesty. The trial would take place in 3 days in the arena. At that time, the main character was working, using gusts of wind to make huge stones fly into the air. All this was thanks to the dragon's breath potion, which enabled him to use more powerful martial arts, having already reached the basic level in martial arts. Calder knelt before the commander, telling him what had happened. The captain was shocked that the enemy of the squad was a slave. The deputy said that Lysel had been taking some kind of medicine, because he used to be just a weakling, but now he had a sacred seal that had appeared out of nowhere. Tiffin appointed Calder as vice-captain, the same position his brother had held, in honor of his self-sacrifice for the team. But Calder did not live up to the captain's expectations. Tiffin said that they couldn't kill him, and that the vice-captain should stop interfering with him. The captain would have thanked heaven if Calder had been even a tenth as capable as his brother. Tiffin ordered that Laisel be eliminated with outside help, that everything be settled quietly before the verdict was handed down at the decisive trial. Little Laisel did not understand why they were torturing them with such cruel training. The man replied that for anyone bearing the name of the Lanlot family, weakness was a sin. The main character woke up. It had all been a dream, but Laiba never let them rest. Although he had inherited the valor and experience of his deceased relatives, Laisel had not inherited all of their memories. The young man went to help with the repairs. He noticed a girl who couldn't move a cart. The girl stood up, pretended to be dizzy, and deliberately fell on Laisel. The guy was pretty angry and said that you should apologize when you bump into other people. The main character began to help, and the girl thanked him for his help and offered him some water. Laisel grabbed the cup of water without hesitation, as he was tired after using his strength. The girl was only too happy about this, because in fact the water was poisoned. Alan was in the alchemy lab at the time, continuing his practice. After much effort, he finally reached a new level and rose to the basic rank. Laisel's method really worked. The soul core improved perception, and the dragon's breath potion increased abilities related to the sacred seal by 20%. The main character even gave a strange recipe that was very difficult to follow, but leveling up was only a matter of time. No matter how Alan thought about it, this was not something he should accept. Having become the guide of a traitor to the Empire, he might never appear in the capital again. Alan thought he was under hypnosis. Those sinister sparks in Laisel's eyes must have been a spiritual illusion that controlled his mind. The girl came to the negotiations with Calder, saying that the mission had been accomplished in the blink of an eye. The girl didn't want to torment the guy, so she let him die quickly. Calder didn't want to question Darkfold's professionalism, but he wanted to make sure they had checked the body. The girl said that the news would be spread as soon as possible. The deputy laughed, saying that he did not regret the money spent. When Calder drank the wine, he grabbed his neck, and blood started flowing from his nose. His drink had been poisoned. Before that, the girl had mocked Laisier's body, noting that her carefully prepared poisonous potion from Masona had taken his life in 3 minutes. But Laisel stood up. He had sensed the smell of Masona in advance, and the assassin's actions were all too obvious. Since his enemies had resorted to such ruthless methods, Laisel wanted to repay them in kind. The vice-captain's assistants immediately detained the assassin, shouting insults at her in anger. The spiritual eye technique is truly a black hole of energy. He was completely exhausted after only a little work with it. Garcia found Laisel. The girl walked up to him, reminding him that they were meeting for the second time, and she wanted to talk. While Xiaomi was busy with her daily chores, she accidentally overheard that Laisel would soon be freed from slavery. Printing masters were talented in martial arts, alchemy, and spiritual arts. Upon reaching the intermediate level in one of the arts, their mastery was recognized. As a rule, printing masters were experts in one specific art and held titles. Only a select few could master 2 arts. That is, reach an intermediate level in 2 of the 3 arts. Priests, who were skilled in martial arts and alchemy, or sorcerers, who were skilled in alchemy and spiritual arts. However, master printers who mastered all 3 arts were called sages. Garcia knew that Laisel had already been informed that the city lord had allowed him to participate in the decisive trial. But this time, it would not be easy. At first, the young man could not remember who the girl was, but soon he realized that she was the annoying girl. The main character noticed that Garcia was overflowing with the energy of the sacred seal, and that she was a 4th-class master of the seal. But alchemists are not experienced fighters like martial arts masters. The girl revealed that the chief examiner this time was Sir Hogg from the Holy Guild. Laisel did not consider the alchemist a threat, because even 2nd-class martial arts masters could hardly compare to him. Garcia asked the boy not to let his guard down, as alchemists had their own special fighting techniques. In addition, Sir Hogg stood out as an elite practitioner of dark alchemy. That's true. Unlike martial arts, alchemy is not focused on combat. Laisel didn't understand what Garcia was trying to say. The girl said that this time the test was quite harsh, so she thought she could help him. Garcia waved her hand, saying she was a fan of his talent and would like to see Laisel free. The main character approached the girl and asked her to lend him some money in that case. When he returned, Laisel was certain that there were ulterior motives behind the flattery. Dinner time was coming to an end, but Xiaomi took Laisel's food and decided to wait for him. The girl told Laisel that she had already heard the rumors. The main character replied that he had been about to mention it. Xiaomi thought he was unbelievable, because from the very first day he had insisted that he wanted to be free and was striving for it. As soon as Laisel gained his freedom and left such an unpleasant time behind him, Xiaomi was happy for him. The main character convinced the girl that he had taken steps to buy Xiaomi's freedom, as she was like a sister to him. The girl blushed, making an excuse that Laisel smelled bad. It could have been a lingering smell from the toxic meson fumes. The final trial could turn out to be much harsher than Laisel had expected. and his current strength might not be enough. In order not to miss his chance at victory, the main character decided to make a breakthrough in his abilities. In the days leading up to the decisive trial, Laisel continued to train hard, building up his strength. On the day of the trial, the Lord told the young man that if he passed the test, he would forgive all his crimes and restore his civil status. The slaves encouraged Laisel as best they could. The Lord asked the manager to remove the bonus for full attendance when he returned. Dr. Allen entered the arena, his legs shaking, but he had something to give to Laisel. Allen opened the chest and let Laisel take the sword he had been keeping for this moment. The dwarf jumped into the arena, introduced himself to Laisel, and declared that he was his opponent. The doctor gave the slave everything he had, so he couldn't lose to his opponent in a duel. Hogg said that Allen had disgraced the Guild of Saints by acting as a representative. If he allowed him to pass the test, the guild would once again be associated with a traitor to the Empire. An enraged Laisel asked Gog if he was referring to his father, who, according to him, had dragged the guild down. The gnome responded with an aura, stating that it was a fact, and that he must defend the pride of the guild. Even in the Guild of Saints founded by Dean Landlot himself, there are those who renounce him. The upcoming journey for the Landlot clan will not be smooth, even if Laisel is freed from slavery. The main character had no intention of backing down. He summoned his technique and said that the slave had a chance. The technique turned out to be talismans for summoning dark demons, beginning a trial that would decide Laisel's fate. The seals of dark demons are an alchemical technique for summoning dark demons using their blood. It is one of the few dark alchemy skills permitted to soul temperers. Sir Hogg really couldn't control his blows. The dwarf was confident in his abilities. Laisel knew that this technique had been invented by Elena. The spellcaster had to constantly infuse magical power into the summoned beast to keep it moving. The red demonic talisman attacked first, swinging its axe at the ground. Laisel jumped high into the air, and the second spirit was about to attack him while he was focused on the first. Hogg wanted to see how the slave would dodge the air sphere of the soul, but Laisel saw no point in it. Instead of dodging, the young man raised his sword in a blocking position and simply bounced off the blow. A bull's head, skilled in the art of weaponry, and a horse's face, wielding magic. Combined with the alchemist Gog's mastery, they unite as a trio of wise men. The Lord rejoiced, for, as always, Sir Gag's blows were capable of shattering even the arena to pieces. The main character was confident that a fake could not do much against a true sage. The bull talisman attacked first. He was capable of fighting, but not of logic. Laisel wanted to show him true martial arts. The swing of his sword was imbued with martial arts, and he was able to hold off the enemy's attack on equal terms. Laisel couldn't overpower the demonic bull, so he parried its blow and flew into the air. The young man noticed that the talisman was casting a spell on him for the second time as he jumped. Laisel managed to deflect the sphere at Gog, who was frightened because, for some reason, it did not explode. The gnome managed to defend himself against the sphere. Hogg decided to use the sphere of the doomed soul. The blue talisman began to charge the sphere even more, concentrating many times more power. But suddenly something strange happened. A demon silhouette appeared in front of Hogg, and his talismans disappeared into the shadows. Immediately after that, Laisel attacked, but the gnome barely managed to dodge, scattering his shield. Since he was in a disadvantageous position, Hogg used gunpowder to create a smokescreen. The Lord was confused, asking himself many questions about Hogg's poor moves. Garcia realized that it was an illusion. While Hogg was busy blocking the soul sphere that was preventing him from seeing, he had killed the bull. This also meant that the young man possessed spiritual arts. Laisel was more capable than Gag had thought, but he would not be able to control creatures that did not have a will of their own. The gnome decided to get serious. He poured all his remaining strength into the bull's talisman. Laisel decided that his bet would be on this strike. He would make him yield with dignity. Raising his sword, the young man used the divine heavenly sword, creating a huge illusion of a blade. This sword would break all chains of limitation, and nothing could stop it, not even the talisman. The slash that cut through the sky was so fast that Laisel struck the bull before it could swing. A single blow was enough to take the talisman's life and scatter its body. The slaves regretted that Laisel had not held back, as they would now have to clean up the entire arena. The main character pressed his blade against Gog, who was on the ground. It was the end of the fight. Despite his anger, the dwarf could not deny it. Hogg was completely crushed and admitted defeat. Laisel Landlot won the decisive trial. From this day forward, the charges against him will be dropped, and his civil status as a resident of Grey Rock will be restored. Ludolf himself was surprised that this child had truly passed the test, thereby increasing the glory of Grey Rock. The captain of the squad burst into the conversation and protested. As commander of the Grey Rock army, he refused to recognize the results of the decisive trial. Typhon stated that, based on his observations, Laisel had cheated and was not a master printer at all. The young man had previously been an ordinary slave, and the strength he had demonstrated was surely an illusion. A man like him, who must have resorted to drugs to temporarily enhance his abilities, had no right to participate in the decisive trial. Laisel replied that if it were that simple, the streets would be filled with master printers. Tiffin had heard about the research into star-shaped blood-destroying potions, a forbidden elixir, in the Guild of Saints with Alan. As it turned out, some slaves had blabbed about what they were doing in the laboratory. Hogg said that he had sparred with him, and was certain that his abilities were not achieved through unconventional means. Tiffin replied that the dwarf was merely an alchemist, he believed, as the captain of the Grey Rock City squad. Tiffin was the only one capable of assessing his true strength. Garcia declared that Sir Hogg's skill was undeniable. His exam was trustworthy. Laisel had lost most of his strength, and it would be unfair to make him participate in another duel. Ludolf agreed with Lady Garcia, but they had to be careful when it came to Grey Rock's reputation. The Lord declared that the trial would be postponed until Laisel regained his strength. The boy considered this nonsense, for Ludolf cared only about his own gain, and the next decisive moment might never come. Laisel asked the Lord for just 2 hours to regain his strength for the second match. Tiffin set his rules. The boy had only 1 hour, and he could not leave the arena. The Lord allowed Laisel to rest for an hour before the start of the second duel with Tiffin. The commander sat on the throne and waited while Laisel regained his strength, listening to the guards' taunts nearby. The main character used a short-range voice transmission and contacted Garcia. He told her that he was a first-level master, especially since the previous battle had drained his strength. Laisel asked Milady for some of her power. If she lent him the power of her sacred seal, he would be able to recover faster. This was a spiritual art that they had to practice together. But Garcia was skeptical, as she thought it was a scam. However, the girl was not opposed, as this duel had been against Laisel from the start. 40 minutes passed, and Lady Garcia had barely transferred any power, despite her best efforts. Laisel tried to gain more time to rest, but the cowardly guys from the Iron Shadow Squad gave him only an hour. Suddenly, Garcia felt signs of a breakthrough in the development of her martial arts talent. Laisel decided to use Xiaomi's massage to restore his strength through natural regeneration. This scene looked quite comical to those watching the preparations. Lord was surprised that Laisel had the nerve to give a massage right before a fight with the commander. Garcia tried to convince him to wait for another trial, but the young heir stood up and decided to start the fight. Laisel still had 5 minutes left, but he decided to start early, hoping for luck. Tiffin respected such boldness. He stood up and said he would not hold back. The observers were skeptical, as Tiffin had a pole weapon and Laisel had a broken knife. The third level of the seal is a criterion of mastery. Anyone at this stage is considered elite and should not be underestimated. Laisel had little of the sacred seal's power left, so he had to drink the dragon's breath potion. Tiffin was surprised that the young man was going to fight him with a broken blade. Jumping into the air, he declared that waiting for recovery was a waste of time. The commander's blows were useless. Laisel easily dodged them. Tiffin realized that he had no intention of counterattacking, so he confidently continued his advance. Although Laisel dodged, Tiffin used a fast technique called the Wolf Moon Split. The young man resorted to using whatever was at hand. Thanks to his mastery of the print, he pulled a stone toward him, but it was useless. Even the huge rock couldn't stop Tiffin's slash. Laisel was not seriously injured. When the smoke cleared, he lunged forward, stunning Tiffin. The commander told Laisel to face him head-on if he had the courage. The Lord was certain that Lanlot was no match for Captain Tiffin, as he continued to flee. The girls realized that in the end, it wasn't enough, and his strength had already been exhausted. Since then, the air had become drier, leading to an increase in static electricity. Thick dark clouds appeared above the observers' heads. Garcia immediately realized that these clouds were not a natural phenomenon, but had been summoned deliberately. Despite being slower, Laisel managed to dodge all of Typhon's blows. The main character himself admitted that he no longer had enough strength to fight him directly. Since he lacked strength, he would have to borrow the power of the Matrix from nature. Garcia noticed that Laisel wasn't just activating the Matrix, but also tuning it. He used the last of his energy to call upon a more powerful force of nature. After that, he summoned lightning using the Thundercall Matrix. This was impossible for a first-level master. A heavenly thunderclap, combining the power of the nature matrix, erupted and struck Tiffin. The dragon's breath potion enhanced Laisel's perception of nature, allowing him to create a more powerful heavenly thunder. But this took almost all of his remaining strength. Everyone thought the outcome was already decided. Even the Lord opened his mouth in surprise. Garcia was impressed. She couldn't gauge Laisel's strength, but they believed it was his victory. Tiffin stood up. The power of the heavenly thunder was not enough. He noticed Laisel's valor. If it weren't for the captain's secret trump card, he would most likely have lost to such a powerful attack. Martial arts are a manifestation of the wolf spirit, the guardian of souls, which saved the commander's life. At that moment, Laisel was stunned. Even his knowledge could not help him against such a powerful trump card held by his enemy, the wolf spirit, capable of absorbing power. If it hadn't absorbed part of the thunder, Laisel would have won. The commander had been pushed to the brink, and there would be no second chance, so he would pour all his strength into the fight. The wolf's speed was terrifying. It managed to strike Laisel in an instant and steal part of his power. No matter how much strength the slave has left, the wolf spirit will be able to absorb it completely. Laisel would no longer be able to summon thunder. His strength was exhausted. The art of the sacred seal was a martial art that used a certain power, sealing it within oneself. It was created by Laiba. The main character did not expect to see this here. Typhon declared that his existence would vanish with the wolf's cry. Even if the guy dodged the blow, he wasn't sure if Laisel could maintain his current state. Divine division was a technique for which he had trained his body to the limit until he achieved a breakthrough. But Laisel swore to surpass Laiba. Typhon was going to end the fight using his moonfangs. The main character decided to take the full force of Typhon's strongest blow. Laisel succeeded, and the second style divine division achieved stunning divinity. He made the right bet, and Laisel managed to achieve the sacred seal of the second level. Having withstood this devastating blow, he revealed his potential as a result of his reaction to stress. All that damage could have led to his death, but he stood his ground. Now Laisel is completely inspired by this breakthrough and his victory over Typhon. The commander said that the second-class sacred seal meant nothing, for he was still head and shoulders above him. The art of the sacred seal utilized external forces sealed within the master's body, but these forces were not entirely under his control. Laisel deliberately allowed the wolf to absorb his power, which only amused Typhon. The commander recognized Laisel's skill and asked permission to free the young man from the hell of his own power. The martial art of the Moonfangs launched a series of long-range attacks aimed at Laisel. The main character asked the commander if he understood how much power he had put into his wolf spirit. The wolf was completely overwhelmed by the seal destroyer and suddenly attacked Typhon. The commander continued to use the wolf spirit, not taming it, not even suspecting that it harbored boundless hatred for him. The Lord's assistant said that it seemed they had a winner, dashing all the Lord's hopes. At the moment the wolf spirit struck, Laisel immediately understood its position. Typhon would now be able to sense its depth. The Lord rose in fear for his commander and ordered his slave to force the wolf to retreat. But Laisel replied that the wolf spirit had become uncontrollable now that the seal had been removed. The wolf would only disappear when Typhon died. Ludolf ordered everyone nearby to quickly come up with a way to save the commander. Garcia found herself in the arena and used her spiritual art, a tranquilizer, to neutralize the wolf. The wolf really did disappear, and the guards rushed to rescue the wounded Typhon. The girl's gaze toward Laisel was harsh. Ludolf was in shock. He had not expected such a turn of events, and they suffered heavy losses. The Lord was about to consult with the manager about the current finances, but Laisel stopped him. The main character wanted to know what would happen to his sentence. The Lord replied that they would think about it later. Laisel became angry, considering it mockery. He had gone too far with the trial, participating twice, and now he learned that it had been useless. Ludolf asked him to understand that every decision related to Greyrock's reputation must be made with great care. In the Lord's eyes, Laisel Lanlot was a slave and a criminal. He had no right to interfere in Ludolf's decision. These words caused the young man to explode with rage. His body was covered in a golden aura, and his gaze was fixed on the Lord. Garcia stopped him and declared that Ludolf's decision was wrong. Since Laisel had passed the decisive trial, he should be restored to his civil status. If the city lord reneges on his words, the public may not like it. And if this news reached the capital, the lord would be called all sorts of unpleasant names. Ludolf announced that as of today, all charges against him would be dropped, and his civil status would be restored. Alan fell to his knees in joy, praising Laisel's incredible strength and his success in court. Xiaomi couldn't help herself and rushed to hug Laisel, congratulating him on his victory. Once, the girl accidentally knocked over a stand, mistaking a sulfur stone for silver balls. Because of this mistake, Xiaomi would not be allowed to eat dinner until she cleaned up completely. After a long time, the girl barely managed to sort out the 2 boxes, but there was still a lot of work to be done. Xiaomi was very hungry, and Laisel wanted to know what she was doing, accidentally scaring the girl. After introducing himself, the guy wondered why Xiaomi was still working. The girl said it had nothing to do with Laisel, who had stolen her food. Newcomers would inevitably suffer the consequences if they didn't follow the rules. The legs of the cabinet gave way, and it began to fall. But Laisel managed to pull Xiaomi back. The girl was more concerned not about her safety, but that all her efforts had been in vain. The main character gave Xiaomi an apple and told her to be quiet, because he could help. A mixture of silver balls and sulfate stones is problematic. The silver balls melted when heated in the furnace, but the sulfate rocks explode when heated. A simple sorting method could be used thanks to a wooden board. Due to their irregular shape, the sulfate stones did not fall off, unlike the round silver balls. Laisel decided to help because stealing food is a punishable offense, so he expresses it that way. Finally, his slavery was over, and the boy gathered his belongings to leave the camp where they had been held. Xiaomi packed Laisel's things. He thanked her and said he would definitely buy her freedom. The girl never thought this day would come, as she had been a slave her entire life. She still couldn't imagine what her future would hold. Laisel had no intention of leaving Xiaomi alone. He wanted to be with her and save her. Mouth thought that Xiaomi would participate in the decisive trial. But Laisel simply wanted to buy her freedom. The slaves were angry that the main character refused to buy everyone else except Xiaomi. The main character caught up with Lady Garcia because he had something to tell her. The girl hoped that the young man would finally admit his guilt, but that didn't bother him. The main character wanted the money to buy Xiaomi out of slavery. Laisel promised to return the money with interest, but Garcia said he could forget about it if he answered a few questions. Garcia was sure that yesterday, after defeating Tifan, Laisel obviously knew how to stop the wolf spirit. The guy lied, saying he was on his guard because no one knew if the wolf would attack him. The girl saw that Laisel even wanted to attack the city lord. If it weren't for her presence, things could have turned out very badly. When he started a fight with Sir Calder, Garcia knew he wasn't the type to let things go. The girl wanted to take Laisel as her apprentice so she could watch over him and teach him the sacred arts. But Laisel quickly refused. He didn't need Garcia to teach him the sacred arts. She shouldn't take on students when her control over the spiritual arts was worse than his. Since he refused, Garcia became angry and set a condition that the debt would be increased by 15%. The last uninjured master printer was furious. He wanted revenge with all his might. Alan treated the boys to drinks to celebrate them finally getting their citizenship. Since Laisel had promised the doctor to make him stronger, he would now be with him. Alan also bore responsibility, as he was the young man's mentor. But Laisel noticed that they would not let him leave Grey Rock. Although he had obtained civilian status, Ludolf had no intention of letting him leave without permission. All that was left was to sabotage him. Laisel regretted not teaching him a lesson. Xiaomi understood why Alan was treating them, but he tried to deny the girl's words. First and foremost, they were being tracked by slave tags. These tags were enchanted, making it easy to locate a slave. When they entered or left the city, a magical detector would sense them. Such tags are almost impossible to dispel, so they are still here. Each slave looks like an independent figure, but in reality they are all connected to each other. The slave mark will only disappear if it is removed from every slave at the same time, and no one will survive unless they die. Alan didn't care about the mark, because if you have power, it's just a decoration. Laisel confirmed these words. The doctor wanted to know the young man's plan. Laisel said that money was everything, since everything revolved around it, not to mention that he had to pay off his loan. Laisel didn't want to work. He was going to get rich through alchemy. After all, it was created to make money. A bunch of slaves were repairing the road, but their teamwork was poor, and there was still work to be done at the arena. A bearded man rode a horse with his gang, almost hitting the slaves in his path. Such an arrogant man must have come from the capital or another country. Xiaomi was tasked with choosing one of the crystals. A whole strip of ore lay before her. The girl chose one of them. Laisel said she couldn't choose that one. Xiaomi was not skilled at searching. Apparently, not every fairy had the eyes for crystallization. Each race boasts its own unique talents. As Xiaomi is an elf, she possesses crystallization vision, which allows her to determine the quality of ore. If she masters this talent, they will be able to easily identify high-quality ores and create more perfect weapons. Alchemical potions are mainly used to unlock the potential of a master printer, while potions made from ordinary herbs are more suitable for ordinary people. But Laisel was sure that talent could be polished before it shone. The guy sincerely believed that Xiaomi would master this skill. Laisel decided to take 11 shards of dragon silver. Alan allowed the boy to use his laboratory, but he was angry that it was being used. The main character wanted to teach Alan the secret art of alchemy, but since he had contradicted him, at that moment, Garcia finally achieved a breakthrough. The martial art reached the basic level. From that moment on, her martial arts rose to the basic level, even though she hadn't expected it. When she was in the arena, Garcia began to feel a surge of energy demanding a breakthrough. It could have been the influence of Laisel, whose skill was beyond measure. An ordinary person could master a maximum of 2 talents, and if Laisel had already obtained 2 of them, his alchemy skills must be terrifying. A master printer of Laisel's caliber should bow down to Garcia and her alchemy skills. Alan and the young man supported the crystals with their astral fingers, but the doctor could barely hold on. He couldn't direct the magic to the right spot and had reached his limit. Laisel couldn't hold them on his own. Garcia entered the office, and the young man immediately asked her to join him, as he couldn't hold the crystals by himself. Fina couldn't use her astral fingers, but Laisel convinced her that he would redirect her magic to the right place. Thanks to Garcia, Laisel finally finished restoring the dragon silver shards. This procedure will increase their value 4 to 5 times. There will certainly be no shortage of buyers, as they are often used in the manufacture of sacred weapons. Garcia looked at her hand. Astral fingers are also known as astral manipulation. It is an advanced skill used to improve certain elements within an object. It could only be mastered by training under a knowledgeable master. Reaching the limit had improved Alan's perception, but now he had to stop practicing alchemy for a while. Suddenly, the door burst open. A bearded man and his group entered the room, delighted to have found her. The man asked Lady Fina Garcia to return to the capital immediately and save the princess. These people turned out to be the royal alchemists, Pollard and Rock. They were there to find a solution to the problem with Princess Portia's illness. Garcia had indeed found a way to cure the illness, but the experimental stage would take some time. The princess is not in the best condition. They have tried countless medicines, but to no avail. The princess has fallen into a deep coma and is being cared for by the president of the Holy Guild, Richie. Garcia did not expect it to be so serious, but she was afraid that the medicine that had been found had not yet been tested in practice. The disease of the underworld is a condition characterized by an aversion to cold, the root cause of which lies in deposits inside the organs. The idea is to absorb the deposits using a heavenly fern saturated with spiritual energy, turning them into icy lymph. Pollard was delighted to hear the recipe, calling Lady Fina an outstanding heroine capable of anything. Since the princess was in serious condition, Garcia could go to the capital after a little preparation. The main character called the girl's method wrong. She got angry, but Laisel asked her to listen. Garcia said she had urgent business, so the trip was postponed until tomorrow. Only a few guards remained in the city to escort the girl to the capital. Garcia angrily ordered Laisel to justify his words. The guy replied that the proposed treatment was promising, but there was one significant oversight. Lady Portia had been suffering from this illness for 5 or 6 years. The prolonged cold had severely weakened her body. The Shadow Igniter potion, while effective against the icy lymph, was much more potent than anyone could have expected, as it could produce heat toxins in her body. Given the princess's fragile condition, the heat toxins will spread through her body like a deadly poison. In that case, Princess Portia will die not from the disease of the underworld, but from the heat toxins. If everything is left as it is, Lady Fina will ultimately become Princess Portia's murderer, considering how dire the situation is. Since the royal alchemists have been unable to effectively counteract the princess's condition, there is only one option left. Use the astral finger, the skill that Laisel had just demonstrated. It is capable not only of purifying herbs, but also of influencing a person's physical condition. Garcia was surprised, as she was unaware of such an application. Laisel noted that his father had always used it this way. With this, the lady could cure the princess. But to fully master the astral finger, more practice was needed. Laisel stood up and began to gather his things to sell the dragon silver shards. Garcia suggested that the young man go with her to the capital. That way, he could help her, befriend the royal family, and save the princess. But the problem was that he was still under close surveillance. The city lord had forbidden him to leave Grey Rock. Garcia was angry with the lord for still adhering to such foolish rules. If Laisel could form an alliance with the royal family, he could use their power to search for his sister Eileen. Everything turned out much better. Laisel was able to sell the silver dragon coins he had bought for 6,000 oolongs for 30,000 oolongs. Nothing was clear yet about Fina, but knowing how vindictive the lord was, he thought he would not agree. An auction was taking place nearby. A man was shouting that someone had bought the strongest slave for only 5,000. Next up for sale was a girl. She was beautiful, and her skin was pale, which indicated her noble origins. In addition, she was knowledgeable in the preparation of medicinal herbs. Laisel couldn't be mistaken. This girl was the one from the Shadow Iron Squad who had been sent to kill him. While the young man was thinking about the girl's identity, a man in the front row offered 5,000 oolongs for the slave girl. That evening, the man wanted to throw a feast for the Kite Squad. As the squad leader, he thanked the Lord for his kind gesture. Laisel raised his hand and declared that he was willing to buy the girl for 8,000 oolongs. People noticed that the buyer was a slave, and even the girl immediately recognized Laisel. The master did not want to give up and resorted to extreme measures, offering 10,000. But the guy said he would pay 15. The captain suggested that the gentleman leave, as it was not worth it. The guy was very serious, and the people themselves were not worth more than 200 oolongs. The gentleman resorted to extreme measures and offered 20,000 oolongs, but Laisel again beat his record, offering 25. A few seconds later, Laisel was declared the winner of the auction, as the gentleman could not go any higher. The main character received papers with information, and learned that the girl's name was Leah Page, and that she had previously been a hired killer. But due to betrayal, she ended up becoming a slave. Actually, Laisel didn't want to spend the money, but he hoped that Leah was worth 25,000. The main character put his hands in Leah's mouth, trying to find out if her tongue had been cut out. but it was still there. She just didn't want to say anything because she was so angry at Laisil. She became angry and declared that she had become a slave because of Laisil. She would not listen to him, as she would rather die than be his servant. The main character said that he didn't remind the girl of her actions, but he didn't want to hurt her. Leah said that Laisil thought he was some kind of hero, saving a beautiful woman from captivity. He had paid a huge price for her and expected something in return. Laisil denied these words, saying that he simply wanted Leah to work for him. He was interested in Leah's talent. Few people today can boast such knowledge. Laisil understood this immediately when he first tasted Leah's poison. The master caught up with the couple, angry that Laisil had taken what he wanted and insulted him in front of all his brothers. The main character asked Leah if she would like it if he stood up for her. Laisil said that as long as he was there, not a single hair on Leah's head would be harmed. The Lord sent his brothers to attack. The water elemental attacked from the side, and the fire elemental flew into the air. The deadly storm and blazing fire techniques combined, creating a natural disaster of a fiery tornado. Laisil completely absorbed the tornado. Noticing that to carry out such a coordinated attack without exchanging words must have taken a lot of strength and time. The guy remained unharmed after such an attack. Even the combination was not considered supernatural. Moreover, if such attacks were carried out by second-class masters of the seal, it would be easy to find loopholes. Laisil covered his hand with an aura, saying that he would demonstrate his power by showing the difference. The dragon constellation technique landed on the ground, creating an icy path toward the enemies. Leia was surprised that Laisil wasn't weak at all, and that she had been tasked with killing him. The master told the commander to give him a bow made from dragon blood. The man didn't know why he should shoot sparrows with a cannon. The commander asked Laisil where he was from, as such strong people were rare in Greyrock. The fact that Laisil had challenged him and his master already showed that he was completely reckless. Laisil noticed a holy weapon in the commander's hands. Apparently, they weren't just a bunch of stupid rich people. The gentleman ordered the captain to teach the enemy a lesson. The man immediately rushed into battle with joy. Laisil sent stone needles at the captain, which were instantly cut in half. As soon as the man wanted to attack him, the main character rose into the air on a stone pillar. The holy weapon was created through many alchemical reactions, based on the best and most special materials. Each such weapon manifested its own specific properties. It can be used by ordinary people to develop their potential. But this weapon is capable of destroying the soul with its power. The captain declared that it was useless, then swung his weapon at the stone pillar. The pillar did indeed split into pieces, but this did not prevent Laisil from dodging the attack. Moments later, the main character grabbed the captain by the face, saying that it was much easier than he had thought. There had been rumors that Laisil was a descendant of the great Lancelot, and this turned out to be true. Leia saw it with her own eyes. The Lord asked the captain not to kill Laisil, as he needed him alive to take him to the capital. While the main character was trying to understand everything, the captain suddenly created a shadow copy of himself. It was the martial art of ghostly shadows. Now the captain could perform multiple attacks and disperse damage among his clones. While Leah watched the battle in a daze, her shackles suddenly opened and freed her. Laisil told the girl to run to the Guild of Saints, as it was not safe there, and on the way she could pass something to his friend. The main character asked Leia to tell his friends that he was going to the capital and would return very soon. The captain had no intention of letting the girl go, but Laisil managed to grab her and protect her from the attacks. The guy abandoned Leah and told her to hurry up. The girl began to fall and looked down in fear, but to prevent her from falling and breaking her neck, Laisil created stone pillars for her. Meanwhile, the captain continued to send his shadows forward to attack the main character. Leah didn't care that Laisil had let her go. She never wanted to be his slave. Moreover, she would never join the Guild of Saints, for she hated them more than anything else in the world. The captain continued to attack, creating pillars around his attacks, but Laisil blocked everything. The man said that the boy's arrogance would never be able to bridge the gap in their strength. A dark dimension appeared around Laisil, and a moment later, a shadow skull appeared before him. When the shadow dissipated, it became clear that the captain had managed to defeat Laisil, as he was holding him in his hands. The guards nearby noticed the fight and decided to intervene, but the gentleman quickly resolved the matter. Garcia would never have thought that Mr. Ludolf would be so difficult. The Lord said that not long ago he had already mentioned that Laisil should stay here, where he was under control. And, as a noble man, he couldn't just go back on his word. It wasn't easy then either, but now the young gentleman had reached a new level. The girl finally returned to the guild, but Laisil wasn't in the room. It had been about 2 hours and he still wasn't there. Alan assumed that Laisil had gone to sell minerals, and had probably found a very good place to earn money. Most likely, he had some urgent business to attend to. But this worried Garcia because Laisil always disappeared so unexpectedly. First-class master printer and assistant squad commander Roy noticed the slaves and said that slaves were not allowed to walk without their masters after sunset. The slaves did not want to steal anything. They were just carrying things. But Roy wanted to find them. Leah noticed that the guards had started patrolling at night. They chased Leah away as soon as she was caught. After all, no one wanted to believe her at the time. The girl was desperate, because no matter what she did, things only got worse as time went on. The captain was pulling 2 carts with cages containing other people besides Laisil. The main character noticed that they were almost there. Even though he had expected the journey to take until dawn, he finally managed to leave the city. And in general, it happened not by his will, so the Lord couldn't do anything to him, but as payment, he had to pretend to be weak and endure beatings. His body felt heavy from the fiery attack. 6 years ago, Leah refused to drink a bitter drink. The man said it was medicine for her eyes. Last time, she was given a different medicine. It was blue and not bitter at all, and Leah didn't want to drink that nasty stuff. The man said he had prepared a new potion that was more effective against the disease. The child began to cry, saying that the man was simply experimenting on her and testing his medicines. The previous potion had been obtained through alchemy, and now they had no way of giving it to Leah. The epidemic was in full swing, and many had already died from complications. To determine the effectiveness of the drug, many experiments had to be conducted. Leah couldn't bear it, because her father was talking about honor again, ignoring his own child. Her father conducted an experiment on 23 patients and added burdock root to the mixture. The treatment proved effective, and there were no obvious side effects. Therefore, he thought that they could already release the medicine for sale. But selling the drug right away, after testing it only a couple of times, wasn't enough. The number of infected people was growing at a crazy rate, so the risk was worth it. The doctors believed that the man wanted to recreate the situation and get his piece of the pie. But they should not forget about morality. Leah said that not everyone could afford this medicine. Her father had created it so that ordinary people could use it. The doctors insisted on how much a bottle of this medicine cost, saying that Leah didn't think about it. The deputy chairman suggested starting small. This news stunned the doctors nearby. They agreed. But first they needed the church's consent, after which deliveries would begin. In the end, these people gave away all the medicine for free, almost depriving Leah's family of everything. The girl apologized for causing them to go to such lengths for her sake. Her father asked Leah if she knew what he meant by family honor. Leah assumed he meant money. When he was young, he fell very ill, and in his despair, a kind person saved him. That person was Leah's mother. Just by the sound of her name, she brought a sense of peace and security to people's souls, and her father was no exception. He hoped that their family could be a source of support for others. As long as people knew they were there, no one would worry or be anxious about anything. But the price was too high. The father replied that problems and difficulties had always accompanied them throughout their lives, and if they avoided them, they would stray from their goals. Especially for Leah's sake, nothing would make her father give up. He was grateful to her for everything and glad to have such a wonderful daughter. All of this was Leah's dream. She had slept all night, hiding in an alleyway. Now she had to be even more careful. It was time for the guards to change. Now she had to figure out how to sneak into the city with the caravans. Leah was not supposed to be caught, but she heard people nearby trying to find Laisil. Alan showed them a portrait of the guy. The guard replied that the matter was not yet under investigation. Leah didn't care, because she was unable to help anyone. She didn't even know if Laisil was alive. Her father's words and Laisil's words mingled together. He was similar in nature to Leah's father. While Alan argued with the security guard, Leah decided to help and went straight to the group. Leah took off her hood and confessed to them that she knew where Laisil was. After a sleepless night, Garcia decided to go to the capital alone. After all, Laisil was always disappearing. Fortunately, her night training had not been in vain. Now she understood how to use the star finger technique, and Garcia was much calmer now. Garcia couldn't find a single instance in all of literature where a finger could point at a person. The gentleman boasted that there were many good hunting grounds in his country. Garcia didn't know much about this, so she decided to talk about it next time. Fina was focused on her books while Alan and Xiaomi were worried about Laisila. Garcia definitely remembered something like that, assuming she had read or heard about it from the Guild of Wise Men. Soon, the girl realized that when she opened the book, she read that the alchemist had given part of his soul to another through a star thread, thereby redeeming his sins. If Laisil was a sage, then Garcia could be confident in her abilities. On the other hand, she had only just begun to master this technique. While she still had time, she needed to practice more, for Garcia was the most brilliant alchemist in the Empire. Garcia spent the entire night testing her abilities on herself, and everything went quite well. The girl assumed that the gentleman was so worried that he even accompanied Garcia to the capital. The guys immediately demanded that Leah tell them who she was. But this confused the girl. Roy noticed Leah, who should still be a slave, and had some questions. Roy also recognized Xiaomi and asked her why she was there, but the girl did not recognize him. The man began to explain that he was Roy. He had just changed his hairstyle a little. Xiaomi finally remembered him, noting that she had immediately realized he wasn't very handsome. Roy took Leah by the hand, saying she was lucky to have escaped. But his job was to find slaves. The man considered this a deception, but the girl declared that she belonged to Laisel. Leah revealed that Laisel had bought her for 25,000 and made her his slave. Roy said that this guy had always gone against the Shadow Iron Brigade. If she were a slave who had escaped from her master, he could legally capture her. But since he couldn't capture her, Roy wanted to make the girl pay with her blood. Alan intervened and ordered the warrior to calm down, since Leah had already said she was Laisel's servant. Roy pointed out that this had nothing to do with the doctor, as he was just a member of the Holy Guild with no rights. Alan said that the city authorities and the Guild of Saints were on excellent terms. Although he was very rude, the guild was not dependent on the city of Grey Rock. Roy said that all the guild's activities were limited to selling medicine. They had benefited greatly from their alliance with the Lord, but ultimately the conclusion was clear. The Guild of Saints were slaves. Alan revealed that once, an outbreak of plague broke out in this city. The city was on the verge of becoming a ghost town, and even the old lord himself was on the brink of death. But it was the guild that saved everyone. That is why the current lord and the entire city government treated them with respect. Of course, they had no right to interfere in the city's internal affairs. But the guild was able to influence some of the lord's decisions, such as personnel changes. Roy was afraid for his position, so he decided to retire, giving Alan his due. Xiaomi and the doctor had one question. Where was Laisel, and what had happened to him? Without wasting any time, Leia began to tell them everything. Alan suggested that Laisel had deliberately lost if he said he was going to the capital. Laisel had only returned to his normal life a couple of days ago, and he had already managed to cause so much trouble. To help the young man, Alan decided to go to the capital right away and rescue him, asking Mrs. Fina for help. Soon, Laisel woke up. He was in a large cage with the other prisoners. The boy did not understand why the gentleman had brought him here and left him in this strange place. Besides him, the troops had captured many different residents and imprisoned them in the same place. Recovering proved to be much more difficult than Laisel had anticipated. He had expended too much energy, and now he could barely move. The man opened the cage and went inside, followed by a small cart, and said he had brought food. This man was one of the brothers Laisel had defeated. He complained that his brother couldn't walk because of the young man's attacks. The man decided to give him something that would make Laisel remember his words with tears in his eyes. He took out a portion. The prisoner's dinner consisted of rice and smoked meat with rosemary. The man also seasoned it all with a deadly garlic sauce. The sauce was so poisonous that even the aroma alone was enough to kill. Laisel didn't understand if this was torture. The man said that whoever didn't eat their portion would lose their tongue. The main character decided to try eating the food, as he could neutralize the poison using his alchemy skills. There was actually no poison in the food, and it tasted much better than when he was a slave. The other prisoners gathered around Laisel and begged him to eat their portions. A pile of food was just what he needed to regain his strength, especially since everyone treated him so well. Garcia appeared before the emperor of the state of Sinhuo, Jaya Raiz, who had come to heal the princess. The emperor noticed that the princess's condition was extremely unstable, and she was on the verge of death. Zaya thought that Garcia had already cured the princess, but she had only just arrived and had not had the opportunity to see her. Pollard added that her condition had stabilized over the past few days, and she was out of danger. Garcia was going to take care of everything. But the strangest thing was that the king did not seem concerned about the princess's condition at all. The third prince of the Sinhuo Empire, Bailey, met Garcia. He had already heard about the genius alchemist. The boy could not have imagined that such a young and beautiful girl could be such a great person. Soon, Garcia entered the princess's chambers, where a doctor was standing over her, trying to stabilize her condition. The doctors tried with all their might to keep the princess alive, preventing her condition from worsening, but even that was difficult in Princess Puce's body. Pollard took the chairman by the shoulder. He had been in Puce's chambers all this time, supporting her condition, and was already tired. Garcia received the herb and wanted to make sure it had been processed. It was of the highest quality, but for the princess, it had to be processed. The princess was suffering from a poison that caused chronic chills. Therefore, they now had to infuse the herb with energy and give it to the princess. They would have to wait several hours and monitor her condition before doing anything else. All this time, Garcia will have to support her until the cold subsides. All this will take at least 5 hours. Any complications that may arise will be treated with other medications. Although Laisla's body was slowly recovering, restoring her spiritual energy was much more difficult, so he needed to come up with something quickly. The prison was located in a completely desolate place, and the guy didn't know what he could use there. The place was filled with the energy of death, so the souls of the dead could be used. Such an act was risky, but he had no other choice. He needed the dead souls to lend Laisla their strength. The young man in the corner noticed Laisel's machinations and immediately realized that he was a master of the seal. The royal alchemists watched Lady Garcia's amazing skills. As Laisel had said, the herb was not so simple. It required an incredible amount of power to use. Garcia could barely sustain such power, but the princess was rapidly improving. After a while, the girl was exhausted. Pollard checked Pews and declared that there was no trace of the illness left. Garcia was very tired, but now everyone was happy because the princess had finally recovered. The girl should have thanked Laisela, because if he hadn't helped, she wouldn't have been able to do it. Pollard also noticed that the princess had developed some strange behaviors that Garcia was unaware of. The princess was completely healthy. Everyone understood that she would fully recover in time, but now her pulse was growing weaker and weaker. The girl immediately rushed to the princess, taking her by the hand. She couldn't understand how this was possible. This couldn't be happening. Garcia had cured Pews with herbs and her own powers, almost completely restoring her. Miss Fina wanted to use another technique, but the man tried to dissuade her, as her strength was running out. Pews was slowly approaching death again, and Garcia had no idea what to do now. The next thing Lady Garcia saw was Pollard above her, for she had lost consciousness from not sleeping for several days. The girl immediately wanted to know where the princess was and what had happened to her, but the alchemist asked her to rest. Rock said that she was fine and better than before, but she continued to weaken. Garcia still didn't understand, because she had healed her and removed all the poison. But Pews continued to die. The girl remembered Laisel's words that his father used herbs to keep himself in shape. Miss Fina said that if Laisel were here, he would definitely find the reason for the princess's deterioration. Garcia convinced the alchemists that they must bring the great sage Laisel Lanton. Garcia got up and left the room. She had to find Laisel to cure the princess. The main character finally restored his spiritual energy, at least to a low level. He succeeded, but now Laisela's mind was filled with echoes of the people who had died in this prison. It was early morning outside, but the kidnappers had other plans. They entered the cage and ordered the kidnapped to stand up. The man led the captives to a gentleman who said it was time to have some fun. Laisel thought he would recover completely and then deal with them, but they brought them out much earlier. Those who are not found within 2 hours are winners. They will be able to rest and eat. Those who are found will be fed to the dogs. Everything was much simpler. They were playing hunters, with the kidnapped as prey and themselves as hunters. Laisel was surprised that these people thought he wouldn't run away as soon as they let him go. In that case, he could even kill them. But one man wouldn't leave him alone. Kazalost was quite strong, although he hid it well. Noticing the hunter's excellent training, in his current state, Laisel would not be able to defeat them all. But the game had already begun. Without letting the hunter count to 3, Laisel sprinted away, trying to outrun them all. The master was furious when he noticed that the main character had run away and hadn't listened to his count. The hunters had clearly underestimated him. Even if they all chased him on horseback, they would never catch up with the young man. Now Laisel had to think about his next move. An unknown guy caught up with Laisel and asked him to wait a moment. Laisel didn't know how the stranger had managed to catch up with him, but the guy was trying to find out if Laisel was a master of the seal. The stranger wanted to know if Laisel had a way to break through the air wall. The entire hill was surrounded by a barrier. The stranger also did not know what it was, but it was because of this wall that they could not escape. After thinking for a moment, Laisel remembered that this guy had been in the same room with him in prison and hadn't shared his meat. The main character asked the stranger to take him to the nearest air wall so they could get out quickly. The situation was becoming increasingly dangerous, as the hunters had already set out in search of the kidnapped. Pollard reported everything to His Highness, who assigned 20 men to the search. Garcia didn't know where to look for him, but suggested searching the entire Grey Rock. Rock had already sent people to search for him. They were the best of the best. Garcia thanked the man for his help and prepared herself. Some people tried to pass, but the guards stopped them, for this was the royal palace. It was Alan, Xiaomi, and Leah. They noticed Lady Garcia and were delighted by the spontaneous meeting. Soon, Garcia learned that Laisela had been captured by hunters and taken somewhere in the capital. Rock called it audacity and ordered that the daredevil who dared to kidnap someone important to Miss Fina be brought before him. Leah also remembered the kidnappers. They were men from the Raven Squad. One was fat and the other was frail. Pollard turned to Rock, as this was a unit under his command. The man could not have imagined in his wildest dreams that he would hear such a thing. Rock suggested that all of this could have been arranged by a man from the Raven Squad named Hoff. Rock assumed it was a misunderstanding, but Pollard and Garcia had already begun to threaten him. Laisel began to study the wall, realizing that the playing area was limited. The stranger wondered if he could break down the wall. Even if Laisel were at full strength, it would take a lot of effort to destroy it. But he had not been fully restored. The main character said that they simply needed to kill whoever was holding up the wall. He assumed that the barrier had been put up by the man in the cloak, a 4th-class seal master. Laisel could have defeated this man, but to do so he needed the stranger's help. Usually they hunted alone, but today, they went together. The captain thought they had decided to escape together, so there was no point in splitting up. The gentleman noticed the young man above his head and asked what he was thinking, since they could get him. The young man decided to resist, throwing a stone at the dog and completely enraging the man. Using the nearest branches, the boy began to retreat, but the hunters were already on his trail. Liesel told the stranger to go first and attack them. He could see that the guy was well trained and it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape, so his task was to stall for 10 minutes. While he was meditating, he was completely defenseless. If he was attacked, he would die. If the boy could protect his life at that moment, Liesel would save him, and they would escape together. The master took out his bow and covered the arrow with magic, aiming at the guy. He wanted to see how long he could keep climbing trees. There was a battle nearby, but Liesel was meditating and didn't react to anything around him. Rock led the group to one of the hunting camps he and his son owned. Liesel was not easy to defeat, but no matter how skilled he was still only a second-class master of the seal, and the gap in strength between the second and even the third level was enormous. Garcia remembered the words of the gentleman who had told them about his camps, which were located throughout the country. The girl asked Rock if he had a camp on Mount Tiangu. The man replied that he did. Soon, the hunters caught up with the stranger. The gentleman decided to punish him for his cruel treatment of animals. The dog ignored the gentleman's orders because it had found some kind of scent, which angered the man. The guy rushed toward the dog to stop it, as it was heading straight for Liesel. But one of the brothers beat him to it using a martial art move, a flame strike. The hunters decided to look around more carefully, as there was surely someone else nearby. The captain suggested that the dog had smelled someone, so they decided to follow it. The gentleman decided to trust his dog, but if it ignored his commands, he would be in trouble. The hunters found Liesel while he was meditating, and an arrow flew right past his head. The captain praised the gentleman's archery skills, also rejoicing that they had found Liesel. The captain also revealed to the gentleman that the boy was regaining his strength for battle. The stranger had no intention of giving up. He managed to get up and even catch up with the hunters. But as he rushed to Liesel's defense, the dog he had previously thrown a stone at latched onto his arm. The gentleman decided to deal with the stranger, but the captain recommended killing Liesel first. Without hesitation, the man redirected his bow and sent an arrow straight at the meditating boy. The impact created a small cloud of smoke, and the gentleman rejoiced that he had torn the young man to pieces. But the stranger managed to get up and protect Liesel with his body. At that moment, the main character opened his eyes and declared that he had fully recovered. The young man got up completely and told the stranger that now it was his turn to save others. The gentleman ordered one of his brothers to deal with Liesel using his fire, but in a split second, the main character was in front of him and knocked him out with one blow. The brother's body flew toward the master, but the mysterious man in the cloak easily deflected it. Liesel had no intention of ending his attack. He immediately rushed forward. The captain appeared before him, eager for revenge, and challenged Liesel to a fight. The main character said that he was not interested in him at all. The captain considered this an arrogant opinion, given the position he was in. Realizing that his enemy would not leave, Liesel decided to strike first, sending his opponent to the ground. The captain managed to use the art of the phantom shadow to reduce the damage he took. In that case, Liesel decided to return the damage twice over and unleashed a barrage of meteorite strikes. Out of desperation, the captain barely managed to use the combat art of the dungeon demons. The main character noticed that this fighting technique had elements of spiritual power, assuming that it was the effect of the sickle. They don't just kill people. Even their weapons are made from the souls of the dead. Liesel decided to release all these souls. Thanks to this technique, he freed himself from the shackles of the shadows. Liesel said that the hunters were careless with human life, disregarding it. All the souls gathered together to take revenge on them for all their evil deeds. The spiritual art of the dance of the crippled souls contained all the hatred and pain they had experienced. Liesel wanted to kill the captain with this attack, but the mysterious man still entered the battle. The blow was impossible to stop, and the hunters could only block part of the huge explosion. After the terrifying impact, the captain was defeated, and Liesel was unharmed. Even a fourth-class master printer could barely stop this attack. At that moment, the master was worried about Captain Haz. The master ordered the man to kill Liesel, even though his task was to protect him, but he offered money. Fourth-class printmaster Mikhail took off his cloak. Although he hadn't fought in a long time, his strength would be enough to deal with Liesel. Mikhail summoned his martial art, the demonic monkey that devours souls. Liesel understood that the sacred technique was already a great sign of power, and Mikhail could defeat him. Throwing himself into battle alongside his gorilla, he used the Fallen Spirit Strike. The main character knew he had almost no chance of winning. Mikhail's attack missed, and Liesel felt everything and was able to dodge any blow. The guy struck, but his blow was quickly blocked. Mikhail even suggested that it was an illusion. Mikhail called it childish, delivering a Leviathan strike that pinned Liesel to the ground. No matter how good his illusory technique was, the key was to avoid eye contact. The Leviathan strike, 3,000 worlds, hit Lysel, and the flurry of blows left him no chance to dodge. When the attack ended, the main character was pinned to the ground with dozens of wounds. Mikkel said he hadn't even warmed up, but suddenly Lysel struck him in the neck. The man asked how this could be, since he had defeated the guy and it couldn't have been an illusion. He avoided eye contact and hit him precisely. Lysel said that the point of illusions is to deceive your opponent. Illusions are easy to recognize during an attack, but each of those attacks was real. To make Michael feel a real physical body during the blow, he interfered with his soul to give him that sensation. Such a move was quite dangerous. If Lysel had been hit by the monkey, he would have been defeated. The man held his neck and unleashed all the monkey's strength to kill Lysel. The main character smirked and said he wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. The weapon he was using now was his comrade's weapon. And its attacks did not only damage the soul. The spirit suffered the most. And if Mikkel wanted him to be completely destroyed, then let him continue fighting. The master decided to settle the outcome of the battle himself. He placed his arrow on the bow and charged it with mana. Lysel noticed that he was about to shoot, so he kicked a stone at the master. The stone flew toward the man and hit him straight in the bow, knocking the tools out of his hands. Immediately after the distraction, Lysel threw his sickle to take the naive gentleman's life. Mikkel immediately rushed to the Lord's defense, using his body to shield him from the sickle. Mikkel used a sealing knot and saved the gentleman, declaring that the fight was over and the barrier had been removed. The main character believed that the enemy was already begging for mercy. He did not know if he could defeat Mikkel, but if Lysel retreated, he would not be able to avenge his brother, who had protected him. Lysel took his bow and loaded an arrow. His master understood that he was going to kill them with his own bow, which was capable of piercing the barrier. Only in the hands of a true master could it reveal its true power, so they would be able to see the true power of the sacred weapon. The Lord was shocked. He could not achieve such terrifying power when he used this bow. Suddenly the barrier dissipated. Mikkel feared for his life and decided to betray his master. Lysel decided to shoot an arrow at the fleeing Mikkel, creating an energy explosion. When the attack dissipated, only a trail of destruction remained. But there was no trace of the man. But Lysel had no intention of letting his master escape. The man declared that he could not be killed, for there would be dire consequences. The main character said that then killing his master would be a good deed, eliminating the problem of the entire country. But Lysel did not have time to decide the man's fate, for his friends had finally found him, rejoicing at their reunion. The main character did not expect Leah to bring everyone together and help save him. Pollard told the Lord that he would pay for kidnapping people, locking them in basements and hunting them down. Lysel believed that all people were wrong. And unsurprisingly, as a rich man's son, he had no idea what life was like for ordinary people. The main character decided to let him experience everything, letting the gentleman be the prey and the kidnapped people hunt him. Pollard understood that Hoff had committed a terrible crime, but they had to punish him according to the laws of the Empire. Lysel believed that if the matter concerned only them and the Empire, then ordinary mortals would not get involved in these affairs. Thinking about the princess, Pollard decided to allow such games, but asked the people not to kill Hoff. Garcia listened to Lysel's advice, but the result was completely different. She is now in critical condition. The main character agreed to go to the cemetery. But before that, he had to take care of something. It was only thanks to a stranger that he was still alive. He blocked the enemy's attack at the cost of his own life. Lysel thought the guy was dead, so he sat down next to him and apologized for not keeping his promise. When he saw the guy move, Lysel immediately asked to heal his wounded friend. The main character learned that his friend had demon blood flowing through his veins, which was why he was so resilient. The guy was also amazed by Lysel's strength, as he had practically defeated Mikkel single-handedly. Although he had escaped, they had achieved their main goal, freedom. The young man also revealed that the meat was not ordinary, but specially seasoned so that dogs could smell it. All these spices have a strong aroma that does not disappear after the meat is eaten. Dogs can smell this scent from hundreds of miles away. The other kidnapped people gave their meat to Lysel, so the dogs found them first. All these people wanted to save their lives at his expense. But without this meat, Lysel would not have been able to recover. The hatred he feels for them cannot be compared to the hatred he feels for his enemies. The main character stood up and said they could set off. Leah wondered whether she should go with them or not. They had previously argued with Alan that she had no desire to serve Lysel. The doctor pointed out that this crime was a mark of slavery on her body that would not simply disappear. Any guard had the right to deal with her. Leah understood that the doctor was telling the truth. But he even resorted to threats, justifying himself once again by saying that the Guild of Saints was terrible. Lysila was taken to the princess. He approached her and did not understand what had happened to Puz. Garcia was able to cure the princess of her illness, but after that, her body began to weaken for some unknown reason. Although her energy was weak, it was still boiling inside Puce. Laisela said that it was very similar to a catalytic reaction, which could not occur in living people. Alan explained that it was a reaction from alchemy. When an alchemist wants to improve something, a catalyst is added to the main material and the material being improved. The process of strengthening materials with a catalyst is called a catalytic reaction. However, such things only happen inside a cauldron or furnace. Laisel believed that it was still not entirely clear, but the princess's body was now being improved. Apparently, she had taken herbs that enhanced each other, and her soul was being used as a catalyst. The main character wanted to know what herbs had been given to the princess. He was given the herbs Fenyin, Xianzhong, and Chengyi, but none of these herbs had been used in similar reactions. Leah envied Laisela's fame. Everyone was always around him, whether they were slaves or the royal family. Out of boredom, Leah began to examine the materials around her and found a rare herb called Xianzhong. Pollard noticed this and told the slave not to touch the princess's medicinal herbs. Slaves are strictly forbidden from entering the palace, but he made an exception for Laisela. The main character noticed the grass in Leah's hands and approached her, asking what she had found. Laisel was very sorry for her ignorance, but Leah Page was quite knowledgeable about pharmacology. The main character added that this was the girl's chance. If she helped save the princess, she would gain a good reputation and trust, which would help her get rid of her slave status faster. Leah didn't understand why Laisel was helping her. The guy said he was doing it because he was a hero saving a beautiful woman. The girl said that the herb was indeed very powerful on its own, but when purified, it became unbalanced, in which case it could act as a catalyst, which is what happened. Garcia didn't understand how this could be. It wasn't the first time they had purified the herb, and everything had gone smoothly before. Laisel replied that it was all due to the star string technique, which most likely acted as a purification. The remaining energy that Garcia had put into it, combined with the purified grass, triggered a catalytic reaction in the princess's body. The princess's soul was damaged. Laisel had only recently learned the technique of restoration. Garcia understood that all medicinal herbs were similar to each other, so they could only make the situation worse. Leah suggested trying to suppress the reaction with poison. The others immediately rushed to her with joyful faces, surprised that Lacey could do such a thing. If the problem with the body was solved, all that remained was to restore Puce's soul. But Laisel had come up with the method himself, so he didn't know if it would work. Everything worked, and the princess's body began to react normally, but after that, all that remained was to remove all the toxins. The main character was able to recover by relying on natural regeneration. But in Puce's case, this method proved ineffective. Laisel came up with the idea of using part of his own soul to heal her. Then, he would recreate the fragment of the soul he needed. If everything is done correctly, there should be no consequences. And since souls are uniform, there will be no problems with that either. While Laisel was infusing part of his soul into the princess, a vision of a demon appeared before him. A short time later, the guy woke up and accidentally hit Alan from the sudden awakening. Xiaomi and Garcia immediately rushed to help Laisel, who had just regained consciousness, but his plan had worked. Bailey held Puce's hand with tears in his eyes, as she had recovered. Laisel was happy that everything had worked out, and that they could now proudly call themselves heroes. After helping the princess, the young man wanted to know how Alan was feeling after the accidental blow. Laisel's blow seemed to fill him with energy, and he felt healthier. The main character didn't know why, but he felt the same way. It was as if his soul had been filled with strength. Leah asked if Laisel had lied when he said that after helping her she would no longer be a slave. If Leah hadn't found the main reason for the princess's deterioration, they wouldn't have been able to save her. Since she recovered thanks to Leah's efforts, the Emperor would surely reward her. When the time came, she could ask for her citizenship to be restored. Laisel offered the girl a choice. She could work for the Guild of Saints so that he could ask her for help. Leah interrupted him and asked him not to mock her. Leah had no intention of working for the Guild, even under threat of death. The girl had always said that she hated the Holy Guild more than anything else in the world. Xiaomi suggested that this anger was due to Leah's hunger, as her stomach was rumbling loudly. Laisel asked Xiaomi and Alan to take the girl away and feed her well while he waited for Lady Garcia. When Fina finally arrived, the young man immediately wanted to know about the princess's condition. According to Garcia, they had informed the king of her recovery. Coincidentally, it was the king's birthday in a few days. He wanted to invite them and reward them for their efforts. The girl did not understand what Laisel wanted to do in the end. He did not even want to explain, because it was all done for her. Lady Garcia was the first to ask for help. Maybe it was a silly idea, but there was no other way for Laisel to get to the capital. If he had hesitated a little longer, the princess might not have been saved at all. The guy asked Garcia if she was sick because her face had turned red. She made an excuse, saying that she hadn't really rested in the last few days. Now Laisel could fill people with energy directly, so he tried to help Lady Garcia. At the Raka estate, the father stood over his wounded son, grieving that he had been so badly injured. Hofu was lucky to be alive. Suddenly, a man ran inside, addressing his master. The second prince of the Huo Empire, Kimbush Avigli, had arrived at Roka's estate and wanted to know about Hofu's condition. Kimbu demanded information from Roka. The man soon revealed that the culprit was Laisel Lanton. Laisel was transferring his energy to Alan, testing and experimenting with it. If he could condense it, he would be able to use much more spiritual energy. Leah took advantage of Xiaomi's naive nature to get her to do things for her. Laisel asked if the girl was tired of bossing Xiaomi around. Leah replied that she was just very good at taking care of others. The main character set a condition. If Leah continued to exploit Xiaomi, he would not take her with him to the palace. This completely ruined her plans, because if she didn't attend the celebration, she wouldn't receive any awards. If she wanted to regain her freedom, she would have to go with Laisel to the alchemy room. Leah didn't want to go anywhere with him, but Laisel was on the verge of a breakthrough in alchemy and couldn't accept her refusal. Xiaomi was sweeping leaves on the street. Sisters Leah and Fina could always help Laisel with something, but she was completely useless. Garcia passed by and greeted Xiaomi. The elf noticed Fina's makeup and immediately pointed it out. Garcia wanted to know where Laisel was, who was busy with his secret studies at the time. Garcia was excited by the news, and she and Xiaomi wanted to check what the boy was really doing. When the girls arrived at the door, Leah met them. Garcia wanted to know what she had done to Laisel. Leah went a little too far, throwing the door open, and they saw Laisel lying on the floor. The main character asked to destroy his spirit with poison, so that it could be strengthened later by reconstructing it. Laisel recognized the poison as Leah's. It barely touched his spirit but severely poisoned his body. The girl wanted to add even more poison, which would have killed Laisel. Alan said that proven alchemical potions could be used to improve spiritual strength. He had never heard of improving spiritual strength with poison. The master of the press was given ordinary herbs. Leah replied that alchemy also used herbs in exactly the same way, which was why they changed their properties. Leah belittled the greatness of alchemy, while the doctor fought for the honor of all alchemy, with which anything was possible. Laisel wanted to know if Fina had any errands for her. She replied that Pollard had invited everyone to the Guild of Saints for an award ceremony. Leah hated that place and didn't even want to go near that evil place. Alan pointed his finger and told the girl that without Laisel, she was nothing. The main character didn't like that the doctor didn't watch his words. But Alan just wanted Leah to be more grateful. This guild was the same one where he used to work, but now Alan wasn't sure if he wanted to return, as he was much better off as Liesel's assistant. Pollard wanted to thank the guys earlier, but he was too busy and couldn't leave. Laisel didn't mind, because the deputy chairman of the guild could be busy. Pollard was shocked that the Lanton family still had living descendants, especially one so outstanding and talented. No one cared about Liesel's status as a traitor. After the old emperor's death, the situation had changed. The other 6 provinces were engaged in such internecine strife that even the imperial court had difficulty dealing with them. Laisel was pleased and noticed that Alan really wanted to return to the central guild. Pollard did not expect such a meeting, but the doctor had significantly improved his skills and decided to return. But even so, Pollard could not allow him to return to the guild. The old man declared that the chairman had been too merciful, so he forgave all of Alan's mistakes. Alan didn't know, but in fact, because of his small mistake, a man had lost his life. The chairman forbade anyone to talk about it, as he feared for Alan's mental health. But even if the chairman agreed, Pollard would not allow him to take Alan back. Laisel learned that the chairman was Richie Ficado, who was known for his kindness and responsiveness. They say he became that way because of many mistakes in his past. Pollard didn't want to talk about it anymore, and asked Alan to continue saving lives and training. This information was a big blow to Sir Alan. He didn't need to hide such important things. If you can't accept your mistakes and take steps to correct them, there's no point in hiding them. Sooner or later, they'll come out anyway. But if, despite all the difficulties, you keep moving forward, the wounds of the past will become armor against life's greater trials. Laisel also finally noticed that Garcia was wearing unusual makeup, which made her feel uneasy. 2 mysterious people were on the roof. They recognized Laisel and wanted to get closer. Xiaomi entered the room and offered Lai some fresh fruit, which she refused. But after much persuasion, she agreed. Xiaomi refused to go to the guild to stay with Li. Leia believed Laisel, but he had no intention of helping her escape. Xiaomi thought it was just a joke. The girl thought Laisel was terribly cunning, but Xiaomi insisted that he always kept his promises. He had always been that way. If he decided something or made a promise, he would do everything in his power to achieve his goal. While the guys were walking calmly, Laisel's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Garcia by the hand and they started running. The main character led the girl around the corner. He immediately sensed that someone was following them, but he didn't know why. The only person who came to mind was Hoff, who was thirsty for revenge for the humiliation. Garcia wanted to know what he was going to do. Laisel replied that the person following them was a hired killer, and if a fight was inevitable, they had to strike first. Laisel lunged forward and immediately spotted the killer in the cloak, dispatching him with a single blow. But when he looked up, the young man saw 5 more mercenaries in the same cloak in front of him. Laisel jumped back immediately, and in a split second, an explosion occurred where he had been standing. The young man could not even imagine that such a huge crowd of people had been following them. The bandits dared to do this only because they were in the capital. It was their territory. The poison Leah had given him had not yet taken full effect, and Laisel had not yet recovered. 2 of them were third-class printing masters, and the rest were second-class. The fight would be tough, but Fina said she would hold off the assassins until Laisel could escape. The assassins outnumbered them, so the girl wanted to cover for him while he ran. While Laisel was thinking about what to do, his grandfather's technique came to mind. The main character used the technique of the unbridled cry, letting out a loud scream that deafened all his enemies. This technique created a shockwave and strengthened his body, but suddenly Laisel began to vomit. The assassins used a combined technique, the devilish fusion, releasing a beam from a huge beast. Garcia stood in front of Laisel, using alchemical art, the Holy Spirit shield spell. The girl was not weak, though she never got into fights. She was still a 4th-class master of the seal. After defending herself from the attack, Garcia recreated her barrier into a magnetic optical heat magic technique. The magic summoned dozens of beams that attacked the assassins, shattering their combined technique. The enemies tried to dodge, but the beams changed their trajectory, easily catching up with the assassins. One of them tried to attack, but the art of alchemy and magical techniques immobilized the enemy. Garcia not only attacked with magic, but also managed to engage in close combat with one of the assassins. The assassins tried different techniques, throwing a dagger, but the girl created a barrier, expecting an easy block. But the mysterious weapon pierced her barrier and the dagger flew straight into Garcia's stomach. The dagger turned out to be a sacred weapon that the assassin was able to return to his hand. Garcia created a circular shield, surrounding herself with a dome. At that moment, the assassin swung his daggers, preparing to strike. But no matter how strong the mage's shield was, the enemy's sacred weapon reached its target every time. Laisel came to Garcia's aid, grabbing the dagger and clenching it in his hands, trying to destroy it. But to prevent the sacred weapon from being used against them, another assassin took one of his own lives. Garcia wanted Laisel to flee, but he refused. Even if he had not been poisoned, it would have been difficult for him to resist them all. Laisel didn't have a sacred weapon, which put them in a hopeless situation. A woman and a man appeared before the pair. The girl didn't understand why they should do such a thing, but the man convinced her that they would make the commander happy. In an instant, Laisel and Garcia disappeared along with the mysterious people, leaving the killers in bewilderment. In times of war, the combat squad fought demons and consisted only of brave and outstanding masters of the seal. Thus, they earned the respect and reverence of the people. However, after the victory of the 7 swords over the Dark Demon, which ended the era of war, the squad disbanded and its members became mercenaries. Now they serve privateers, kings, lords, or other people willing to pay. Although they no longer have their former greatness and glory, they cannot be ignored. Laisel and Garcia found themselves in the meeting hall of Weaven. All these people were masters of the press and warriors of the Weaven squad. Laisel also learned that these people had once been supporters of the Sword King. Garcia was able to rest and heal herself. All she needed was a breather after the intense battle, and all of this happened because of Laisel's weakness. In recent days, he had become too complacent and had put her in danger. The commander of the Huaywen squad, 5th-class printing master Uli Bera, kept Laiba's grandson waiting for a long time. The people they brought back were taking unnecessary risks again. Uli took Garcia's hands and concluded that she was Laiba's descendant, delighted to have met her. The girl revealed that she was not from Landlots, but the man whom the man had mistaken for a slave. Uli changed his goal, taking Laisel's hands. He was glad to have met the descendant of the first Sword King. The man also added that they had once been a squad under the command of Laiba Lanton. After the death of the Sword King, all the troops under his command were disbanded and suppressed. Now, they are tied to the combat chamber, and the regiment barely survived. But they remain loyal followers of Laiba Lanton, and they were very happy to learn that Laiba's grandson had survived. Uli was not afraid of the consequences. The empire was teeming with spies, but not all the palaces were against them. One day, they would restore the former glory of the Blade King. The only thing to fear was the Ghostwind Squad. The squad belongs to the Imperial Palace and stubbornly opposes the supporters of the King of the Blade. They were sent to the capital to observe and suppress rebellions. They were tasked with monitoring the territories and even the local government. Garcia suggested that the spies were the same assassins, but the girl next to her refuted this theory, because in reality, they were hermits. Hermits are a group of assassins with no specific goal. They were suddenly attacked, but thanks to unexpected saviors, they were saved. Given Laisel's status, it was not surprising that he had gotten into such trouble. But Uli did not think things would be so bad. The man suggested that Laisel join Huiven's squad. While he was here, they could summon the rest of Laiba's supporters, and their power would grow stronger. As a follower of Landlot's, in Laisel's position, he could benefit more from such an alliance than the other way around. Right now, he is too weak to control them, which means Laisel could become nothing more than a powerless puppet. The main character thanked Uli for his offer, but decided to think about it first. Laisel had not yet fully decided whether he wanted to join this group, but he apologized to Garcia for the trouble. The girl asked Laisel to become her apprentice, and she would do everything in her power to protect him from danger. The main character did not want to become her apprentice because he simply wanted to become stronger. Alan soon returned, having lost all trust and unable to return to the guild. But the doctor had a request. Alan asked Liesla to stay by his side and develop his skills to become a better alchemist. The doctor was troubled, and Alan begged Liesla to take him in as his apprentice. Leah was at the end of her rope. She called Laisel to her because she had important news. Taking out the flask, Leisha showed it to the boys. Laisel immediately realized that it was a poison that perfected the soul. The main character and Alan were ecstatic about the item, and Leah was able to prove her perfection. Xiaomi revealed that Leia was supposed to test the effects of her potions, but there was no one around, so she tried them on herself. When preparing potions, it is essential to test samples. But there was no need to panic, as she had already taken the antidote. The main character took the girl by the hand and said that from that moment on, he was ready to help her with anything she wanted. Taking Leah by the hand, Laisel actually began to transfer energy to her to restore her strength. Alan decided to apologize for his previous rude behavior. She was absolutely right, because Alan felt ashamed. An awkward atmosphere surrounded them. Laisel and Alan seemed like different people. Their behavior had changed dramatically. Late at night, the main character went outside and took a red crystal out of his pocket. This red artifact was given to Laisela when he ended up in the Huiwen meeting hall. Uli revealed that it was a weapon that had once belonged to Laiba. Although the blade was badly damaged, they kept it as a memento. It cannot be repaired, but even if only the hilt remained, it still carried power. And since this artifact belonged to Laiba, Laisel must study it thoroughly and become stronger. The second emperor was furious that all three mercenary groups had failed to kill Laisel. He had already said to simply send guards after him. But Rock convinced him that this could spark a huge scandal. Kimban's sister's recovery was not at all convenient for him. Although his father had decided to make him his heir, his confidence was becoming more shaky with each passing day. His brother also had his eyes on the throne, and now the third had recovered. Rock asked him not to worry so much, for the superiority had already decided to make him his successor. The man said that he was Prince Xinhuo, and Rock was a minister. They were not ordinary people. This was their land, and they were born here to rule over it. Puce wanted to go for a walk, as she thought she was completely healthy. But Bailey tried to convince her that she needed more rest. Puce believed that since some young man had saved her, she should go and thank him in person. Prince Xinhuo Fleur Avigeri entered the room, delighted that his sister was feeling better. Puce thanked him for his concern, but her brother did not need it. He had also overheard that some young man had saved his sister and wanted to know more about him. Bailey initially thought that Lady Fina had healed his sister, so he knew nothing about the young man. But outwardly, he looked completely unremarkable. Fleur had heard that he was the surviving grandson of Lanlot, a descendant of that very family of rebels. Moreover, as soon as the empire weakened and turmoil began, Lanlot's offspring suddenly appeared. And then he decided to nobly rescue the princess of that very empire. Her brother wanted to send a ghostly wind to follow him, but her sister didn't want to bother him. She pointed out that it was their father's birthday soon, and he had been invited. Therefore, Fleur would be able to meet him in person. The guy respected Laisel's kind gesture, so he listened to his sister's wishes. The main character lay on the ground, exhausted, asking Mr. Pollard to give him holy water. Using the water, he was finally able to strengthen his spiritual powers, though it was difficult. Leah noticed Laisel's training and was surprised that he had been training all night. But the young man asked Laisel not to worry, for he did not forget the importance of rest. The main character admitted that Leah had exceeded all his expectations. He never thought that the girl would create something that could influence a master of seals. Now that he had rebuilt his spiritual strength, Laisel could transform energy with great success. Laisel could also temporarily transfer the power of the seals to ordinary people. He could already feel how much his spiritual powers had changed. Now he could reproduce his energy many times better. Leah began to ask the young man to let her try the power of the seals, for she was just an ordinary person. The method of transferring energy was very similar to Laiba's method. The basis of this sacred technique was that a person, having received energy from outside, sealed it inside their body. Laisel intended to seal his energy inside others himself, allowing them to use it independently. But this was only theory. Laisel had not yet thought about the possible consequences and side effects. The main character decided to test the new technique on Alan, who was completely ready for the experiment. Observers gathered around, and Laisel waved his hands joyfully, transferring his powers. The outline of Alan's spirit appeared above him, filling the doctor's body with the power of the master of sealing. After the technique, Alan felt weak all over, and he was dizzy and nauseous. The poor health was the fault of his energy pressure. Now it was completely different, and apparently would not be able to merge with Alan. It seemed that he would have to watch it, and guide it in the right direction. Leah wanted to try, but Laisel wasn't sure how to control the power, so he was afraid. The girl had always wanted to try the power of a seal master. She would never have become a mercenary if she had such power. Laisel suggested that Leah tell him why she hated the Holy Guild so much, and why a healer had become a killer who wanted to gain the power of the seals. Leah remained silent, and the main character did not want to force her to speak, so he suggested visiting Alan. The girl began her story 6 years ago, at a time when the plague was in full swing. Her father had invented a cure. It was even recognized by the Holy Guild. After reaching an agreement with the guild, their medicine began to be distributed, giving the poor a chance at recovery. Her father had spent his entire life striving to restore his family's honor, and Leah was firmly convinced that all his actions were leading him straight to his goal. But then disaster struck. 82 people had already died because of the medicine. Her father regretted everything. Since so many people had died because of his medicine, he decided to send his daughter away so that she would not be brought into trouble. Soon, unable to bear the guilt, Leah's father committed suicide when his daughter was taken away. Then she found out that people from the guild had added a poisonous powder to the medicine without her father's consent. This was the key factor in the deaths of the people and her father. Therefore, Leah began to study deadly poisons, joined a dark organization, and needed any power she could get. The girl understood perfectly well the difference in strength between ordinary people and masters of the seal, which was impossible to overcome. And the people responsible for her father's death had long since left the guild. Therefore, Leah needed the power of the seals. She had to find these people and punish them as they deserved. Laisel asked her if she had thought about the consequences she would bring upon herself by killing the members of the Holy Guild. Leah said she didn't care, for she had already accepted death. These words silenced Laisel. He had no right to judge the girl and tell her what was right or wrong. If Leah wanted power, Laisel couldn't refuse, because he had given her his promise to help her with everything in his power. Xiaomi suddenly distracted the others from their conversation. She was extremely frightened, which alarmed Laisel. The cause of the commotion was Lord Liufold, the enraged city lord, who had arrived at Laisel's side with his subjects.